My stepmother's slap still burned on my cheek when my father roared at me to stop snitching. He claimed the house and my grandmother's money belonged to him, calling me a parasite. I had kept their secrets for years, but that ended tonight. A helicopter landed in our backyard, and the billionaire grandmother they thought was senile stepped out to take back everything they thought was theirs. My name is Lena Harrow. The candles on the cake flickered in the drafty dining room, casting long, dancing shadows against the mahogany walls of the house in Maple Ridge. It was my 30th birthday. The number felt significant, heavy, like a stone dropped into the deep well of my stomach. Around me, the air smelled of roast beef, expensive red wine, and the distinct, cloying perfume my stepmother, Vanessa, wore like armor. To an outsider looking through the bay windows, we must have looked like the perfect American family. There was Grant, my father, sitting at the head of the table with a patriarch's stiff posture. There was Vanessa to his right, her smile tight and practiced. There was Landon, my half-brother, scrolling through his phone with the bored entitlement of a 22-year-old who had never paid a utility bill in his life. And there were a few aunts and cousins, scattered like props to fill out the scene. I held the heavy ceramic platter, my fingers trembling slightly under the weight. The cake was a vanilla sponge with buttercream frosting, chosen because it was Landon's favorite, not mine. I placed it in the center of the table. "Make a wish," someone said. I think it was Aunt Marge. Her voice slurred from her third glass of Chardonnay. I closed my eyes. Behind my eyelids, the darkness was a relief. I did not wish for wealth or a husband or a promotion at Pixel Harbor Lab, where I spent 12 hours a day staring at user interface designs. I wished for something far more pathetic. I wished for peace. I wished for a single week where the shouting did not shake the floorboards. I wished for silence. I blew out the candles. The smoke curled up, gray and thin. Applause rippled around the table. It was polite, perfunctory. Vanessa stood up, her silk blouse rustling. She moved toward me, her arms opening wide. "Happy birthday, darling," she cooed. She pulled me into a hug, to the room. It looked maternal. To me, it was a warning. Her fingers clamped around my left wrist, digging hard into the soft flesh. She pressed exactly where a bruise, currently fading to a sickly yellow, was hidden beneath the long sleeve of my sweater. That bruise was a souvenir from 3 days ago when I had been too slow to transfer money into the joint account for groceries. I flinched, but I did not pull away. I had learned that pulling away only made the grip tighter. "Thank you, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady. She pulled back, smoothing my hair with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked at the bruise she had just aggravated, obscured by fabric, and gave a microscopic nod. It was a reminder of our shared secret. The violence in this house was a language only we spoke fluently. The applause died down. The silence that followed was sudden and absolute. It was as if someone had cut the power to the room. Grant Harrow cleared his throat. He picked up his crystal wine glass, swirled the dark liquid, and then set it down with a sharp clink against the wood. He did not look at me. He looked at a spot on the wall just above my head. "The party is over," he said. The aunts and cousins exchanged confused glances. Landon finally looked up from his phone, a smirk playing on his lips as if he had been waiting for the main event. "Dad?" I asked, still holding the cake knife. Grant looked at me then. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth that fathers are supposed to have for their daughters, especially on their birthdays. "Tomorrow morning, you pack your bags," he said. His voice was flat, conversational. "You are moving out. I am done supporting you." I stood frozen. The knife felt slippery in my hand. I looked around the room, trying to process the words. Supporting me? My eyes traced the contours of the room. I looked at the new leather sofa set in the living room, purchased 6 months ago. I looked at the oak dining table we were sitting at. I looked at the spread of food, the bottles of wine, the very clothes on Landon's back. I paid for the sofa, $3,000. I paid for the groceries every week, $400. I paid the property taxes last month, $6,000. My salary from Pixel Harbor Lab didn't go into savings or vacations. It went into the bottomless pit of the Harrow household expenses. "Dad," I said, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle. "What are you talking about? I pay the mortgage. I pay for everything." "I have transferred the deed," Grant interrupted, his voice rising. "The house is now in Vanessa's and Landon's names. You are not on it. You never were. And as of tomorrow, you are trespassing." Vanessa took a sip of her wine, her eyes gleaming over the rim of the glass. She set it down delicately. "It is just time for you to grow up. Lena," she said. Her tone was patronizing, the way one speaks to a slow child, a single woman, 30 years old, no husband, no prospects, always hanging around those lawyers and auditors at your job. It is embarrassing, really, staying in your parents' house like a parasite. The words were calculated. In the original script of my life, people like Vanessa usually attacked single mothers, calling them a disgrace, but I had no children. I had only my career and my draining devotion to this family. So she painted me as a leech instead. She twisted my profession, my independence, and my solitary status into a moral failing. I looked at Grant. The betrayal was physical. It felt like a punch to the gut, winding me. "This is my home," I whispered. "Stop snitching," Grant snarled. The phrase hung in the air. It was the family motto, the command that had ruled my life for 5 years. "Stop snitching." "You opened your mouth to your grandmother again, didn't you?" Grant accused, leaning forward. His face began to redden. "I told you, stop snitching. If you talk to Grandma Eleanor one more time, you are dead to this family." I blinked, trying to make sense of his rage. A week ago, I had called Grandma Eleanor. She had sounded frail on the phone, her memory slipping. I had mentioned, just in passing, that things were tight, that Grant was stressed about debt. I hadn't told her about the abuse. I hadn't told her about the gambling. I had just said we were struggling. I didn't say anything. I stammered. I just asked how she was. "Liar." Grant slammed his hand on the table. The cutlery jumped. The wine in the glasses trembled. "You are trying to poison her against me. You are trying to cut me out. You think because you pay a few bills you own this place? You are just trying to score points with her money. You are a gold digger, Lena, just like your mother was." The injustice of it rose in my throat like bile. "A few bills?" I asked, my voice rising for the first time. "Who paid for the roof repair last winter?" $10,000. "Dad, who paid for your heart surgery deductible?" $5,000. "Who pays the heating bill? Who buys the food?" "Don't you dare throw numbers at me," Grant roared. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "You live here out of my charity, and you use the money Grandma sends to make yourself look good." Vanessa stood up quickly, placing a calming hand on Grant's heaving chest. "Grant, honey, sit down," she said soothingly. "You know what the doctor said about your blood pressure. I will handle this. Let's clear the table. Lena, come help me in the kitchen." The guests were staring at their plates, terrified to move. Landon was openly grinning now. I did not want to go into the kitchen. I knew the geography of this house better than anyone. I knew where the blind spots were. We had installed a security system 2 years ago. Cameras in the hallway, the living room, the porch, but the kitchen, specifically the corner near the pantry, was a dead zone. Vanessa's grip returned to my arm, firmer this time. She pulled me up. "Come on, Lena," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Let's clean up this mess." I let her lead me. I felt detached, as if I were floating above my own body. We walked through the swinging door into the kitchen. The bright fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The pile of dirty dishes from the preparation phase lay in the sink. As soon as the door swung shut, cutting us off from the dining room, Vanessa dropped the act. She spun me around. The slap came so fast I didn't see it. It was not a theatrical slap. It was a heavy, open-palmed strike that connected with the side of my jaw with a sickening crack. My head snapped to the side. I tasted copper immediately. My teeth cut into the inside of my cheek. I stumbled back, catching myself against the granite counter, granite that I had paid for. Vanessa stepped into my personal space. She smelled of expensive vanilla and rot. She leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. "I told you to keep your mouth shut about the old woman," she whispered. Her voice was low, a hiss of pure malice. "You thought you were clever, didn't you? Calling her up? Crying poverty? Well, look where it got you." I stood up straight. My cheek throbbed with a heat that felt like a branding iron. I wiped the corner of my mouth with the back of my hand. When I looked at it, there was a smear of bright red blood. "You are finished here," Vanessa continued. "Tomorrow, you leave, and if you try to come back, if you try to talk to Grant, or if you try to contact Eleanor again, I will make sure you regret it. You are a parasite. Lena, we are just cutting you loose." She stepped back, smoothing her blouse, waiting for me to cry. She was waiting for the begging. She was waiting for the Lena of 5 years ago, the Lena who was desperate for family, desperate for approval, the Lena who would apologize for being hit. But that Lena did not exist anymore. She had died somewhere between the roof repair payments and the second mortgage I discovered Grant had taken out in secret. I looked at Vanessa. I looked at her perfectly manicured nails, the nails that had just drawn my blood. I looked at her smug, victorious face. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. It was not fear. It was not sadness. It was the cold clarity of a user experience designer realizing the system is broken and needs to be dismantled. I did not scream. I did not strike back. "I understand," I said. My voice was devoid of emotion. Vanessa blinked, surprised by my lack of reaction. She narrowed her eyes, looking for a crack in my composure. When she didn't find one, she scoffed. "Good," she said. "Get your things. Be gone by noon." She turned and walked back into the dining room to rejoin the party, leaving me alone with the hum of the refrigerator and the taste of blood in my mouth. I stood there for a long moment. I touched the silver necklace hanging around my neck. It was a simple chain with a small fox pendant. It was the only thing Grandma Eleanor had given me directly, placed in my hand 5 years ago before Grant stopped letting me visit her. "Foxes are survivors. Lena," she had whispered. "Remember that." Grant and Vanessa thought Eleanor was just a senile old woman, a cash cow to be milked until she died. They thought I was a helpless host organism they had finally sucked dry. They were wrong. I walked out of the kitchen, past the dining room where they were laughing now, the tension gone as if I had never existed. I climbed the stairs to my room. I did not pack. I lay down on my bed, staring at the ceiling. My cheek burned. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with panic, but with adrenaline. "Why now?" I asked the darkness. Grant was greedy, but he was also lazy. Kicking me out meant losing his primary income source. The house bills alone were $3,500 a month. Without me, they would drown in 60 days. So why kick me out? Why the sudden, violent urgency? They had transferred the deed. That took paperwork. That took time. They had planned this. Why would they cut off their funding unless they had found a new source? Or unless they were afraid I was about to find something out? "Stop snitching." The phrase echoed in my mind. What were they so afraid I would tell Eleanor? I knew about the credit card debt. I knew about Landon's gambling. But was that enough to warrant an eviction? Was that enough to risk losing the house? No. There was something else. I rolled over and looked at my laptop sitting on the desk. I thought about the hidden folder I had found on the shared family computer last week, the one I hadn't had time to open because Vanessa had walked in. I touched the fox pendant again. The metal was cool against my skin. If they wanted a war, I thought, staring at the shadows lengthening across the floor, then I would give them one. I would not be the victim in their story anymore. I would be the villain in their nightmare. My hand went to my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen illuminated my face in the dark room. I didn't call anyone, not yet. I just checked the date. October 14th, my birthday. The day I died. I whispered to the empty room, and the day I was born again. Downstairs, I heard Grant laugh, a loud, booming sound of a man who thinks he has won. He had no idea that he had just set fire to the only bridge that could have saved him. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't pray for peace. I began to plan, to understand the cold precision with which I began to dismantle my family that night. You have to understand the girl I was 5 years ago. I was not the woman who paid for roof repairs and balanced the household budget. I was 25 years old, heartbroken, and professionally adrift. My long-term relationship had ended in a way that left me questioning my own worth, and the design studio where I had poured my soul had declared bankruptcy the same week. I was drowning, and when Grant Harrow threw me a lifeline, I grabbed it with both hands, blind to the fact that it was actually a noose. "Come home," he had said over the phone, his voice warm and fatherly in a way I had not heard since I was a child. "You need a place to stand up again. Lena, we have plenty of room." It sounded like salvation. Grant had married Vanessa only a year prior, and I wanted to believe in the new leaf he claimed to have turned over. He told me he had retired early due to health issues, that his income was fixed and modest, but he wanted to help his daughter. We made an unspoken pact, a silent contract that would define the next half-decade of my life. He would provide the roof, and I would provide the stability. I agreed to cover the grocery bills, the utilities, and the property tax, seeing it as a fair exchange for a sanctuary where I could heal. It was a trap, of course, but the bait was sweet. In those early months, Vanessa was a revelation. She called me her daughter with a casual ease that made me ache for the mother I had lost. She cooked elaborate dinners, roast chicken with rosemary, heavy pastas, apple pies from scratch. She would sit with me at the kitchen island while I updated my portfolio, pouring me tea and telling me how talented I was. She said I was too good for the ex-boyfriend who had left me, too skilled for the studio that had failed me. She created a holographic projection of a happy family, and I was the perfect audience. I wanted it to be real so badly that I ignored the glitches in the image. The first glitch happened 3 months in. It was the day the phrase "stop snitching" entered our lexicon, etched in acid. I was on a video call with Grandma Eleanor. She was in her sunroom on the East Coast, looking frail but sharp-eyed. We were chatting about mundane things, the weather, her garden. She mentioned she had sent a check to Grant specifically to fix the leaking transmission on his old truck. "I hope he got it fixed," she had said, her voice crackling over the speaker. "I worry about him driving that old thing." I frowned, confused. I had not seen the truck in the driveway for a week. Instead, a brand-new, gleaming silver sedan sat there. Grant had told me he had traded the truck in and got a great financing deal. "Oh, he bought a new car." "Grandma," I said innocently, thinking I was sharing good news. "He traded the truck. It is a beautiful silver sedan." The change in Eleanor's expression was subtle, a tightening of the lips. But before she could respond, the connection cut out. Grant had walked into the room and pulled the router plug from the wall. I spun around on my chair. Grant was standing there, his face a mask of fury I had not seen since my childhood. He did not look like the benevolent father anymore. He looked like a cornered animal. He threw my phone. It hit the wall with a sickening crunch, the screen shattering into a spiderweb of cracks. "You stupid girl," he screamed. "Dad?" I shrank back, the old fear rising in my throat. "Stop snitching," he roared. The words sprayed from his mouth. "You do not open your mouth to her about my business. Do you hear me? Stop snitching." He stormed out, leaving me shaking in the silence of my room. I stared at my broken phone, trying to process the violence of his reaction. It was just a car. Why was he so angry? That night, Vanessa came to me. She did not come to comfort me, though she played the role well. She took me out to the backyard, away from the house, into the cool night air. She put a shawl around my shoulders and spoke in a soft, conspiratorial whisper. "Lena, honey, you have to understand," she said, stroking my arm. "Your father is under a lot of pressure. Grandma Eleanor, she is old. She gets confused. If she thinks we are spending money wrong, she gets upset. And when she gets upset, She cuts us off, and then your father gets stressed, and when he gets stressed. She let the sentence hang there, heavy with implication. There are rules in this house. Lena, she continued, her eyes locking onto mine. Hidden rules. If you want peace, you keep your mouth shut. You do not tell her about the money. You do not tell her about the debts. You do not tell her if we argue. Just stay silent. And everyone lives in peace. Stop snitching. It is for your own good. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I thought I was agreeing to protect my father's health. I thought I was agreeing to keep the family stable. I did not know I was agreeing to become an accomplice to my own exploitation. From that day on, the phrase became a weapon. It was used when I found the final notices for credit cards Grant had hidden in the junk drawer. Stop snitching. It was used when I walked in on Landon playing online poker, betting thousands of dollars he did not have. Stop snitching. It was used when Grant lost $10,000 on a penny stock tip he had found on an internet forum. Stop snitching. If you tell Grandma, she will stop sending the checks, and we will lose the house. Do you want to be homeless again, Lena? The violence crept in slowly, masquerading as discipline or accidents. It was never a punch in the face, not at first. It was a pinch on the soft skin of my upper arm when I asked why the electricity bill was so high. It was a shove against the doorframe when I questioned why Landon needed a new gaming console when we hadn't paid the water bill. Vanessa was the master of the invisible wound. She knew exactly where to grab me so the clothes would cover it. She knew how to twist my wrist in the kitchen, in that blind spot where the security cameras couldn't see, bringing me to my knees while whispering venom into my ear. You are ungrateful, she would hiss. We took you in. We fed you. And you want to ruin it? I learned to wear long sleeves in the summer. I learned the art of color-correcting concealer to hide the yellowing bruises on my collarbone. I learned to silence my own whimpers. There was one time, about 2 years ago, when I almost broke. Vanessa had thrown a heavy ceramic bowl at me because I hadn't defrosted the chicken on time. It had shattered against my shoulder, cutting the skin. The pain was sharp and hot, and the injustice of it was overwhelming. I grabbed my keys and ran to the front door, my hand hovering over the keypad to dial 911. Grant was there in a second. He didn't hit me. He did something worse. He grabbed my hand, not with anger, but with a desperate, terrified grip. Lena, stop, he pleaded, his eyes wide. Think about Grandma. I froze. She has a weak heart. Lena, he said, his voice trembling. If the police come here, if she finds out, the shock will kill her. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the reason your grandmother dies? And think about the neighbors. Think about your job. Who will hire a girl who sends her own stepmother to jail? The guilt washed over me, a cold, suffocating wave. He knew my weakness. He knew I loved Eleanor. He knew I terrified of being the cause of anyone's pain. He weaponized my empathy against me. I dropped the phone. I let Vanessa bandage my shoulder. I apologized. Meanwhile, Eleanor remained a distant figure. A voice on the phone filtered through Grant's censorship. She lived on the East Coast, over 1,000 miles away. Grant controlled the communication channels with military precision. I was only allowed to speak to her on speakerphone, with Grant or Vanessa sitting right next to me, their eyes boring into the side of my head. Remember, Grant would mouth silently before every call, "Don't snitch." If I ever tried to hint at the truth, if I said I was tired, or that work was hard because I needed money, the call would end abruptly. Grant would claim the internet was down, or he would tell Grandma I was busy, that I had a migraine, that I was out with friends. He would isolate me from her for months at a time, blocking her number on my phone, intercepting her letters. She is getting senile, Grant would tell me. She doesn't remember what she says. It is better if you don't bother her. But I was a UX designer. My entire career was built on observing user behavior, tracking data flows, and identifying pain points. I couldn't turn that part of my brain off, even when I was terrified. I started to notice the patterns. I created a spreadsheet, hidden deep within a nested folder on my laptop, labeled Project Phoenix. I began to track the dates Grandma Eleanor said she sent a gift or a check. I cross-referenced them with the sudden influxes of cash in the household. Grandma mentioned sending a birthday gift for Landon. 2 days later, Grant buys a new set of golf clubs. Grandma asks if the money for the boiler repair helped. That same week, Vanessa comes home with 3 designer handbags. Grandma emails me to an old address Grant forgot I had, asking if I received the bonus she sent for my promotion. I never saw a dime. That month, Landon bought a motorcycle. The money was disappearing. It was a one-way flow from Eleanor to Grant and Vanessa, bypassing the intended purposes completely. And I was the cover story. They were using my name, my supposed needs, my struggles, as the narrative to extract sympathy and cash from an old woman who loved me. I lay in bed that night, the night of my 30th birthday, forcing myself to remember every single instance. I replayed the memory of the car. I replayed the memory of the bowl shattering on my shoulder. I replayed the sound of Grant's voice telling me I would kill my grandmother if I spoke up. It was a lie, all of it. The stop snitching rule wasn't about protecting Grandma's heart. It wasn't about family privacy. It was the firewall they had built to protect their embezzlement scheme. They weren't afraid of her dying of shock. They were afraid of her cutting off the supply. I touched my cheek, flinching at the tenderness. If I had spoken up 5 years ago, I thought, the regret bitter on my tongue, I would have saved myself 5 years of hell. I would have saved Grandma hundreds of thousands of dollars. But regret is a useless emotion unless it is converted into fuel. I sat up in bed. The house was quiet now. I could hear the distant hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the same appliance I had leaned against when Vanessa slapped me. They thought the command, "Stop snitching," had broken me. They thought it had trained me into submission, but all they had really done was teach me how to hide. They had taught me how to observe from the shadows. They had taught me to keep receipts, to memorize dates, to document the user journey of their cruelty. And now, I was going to use all that data. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the darkness. I didn't open a job search site. I didn't look for apartments. I opened the spreadsheet. Grant and Vanessa had given me 24 hours to leave. That was a mistake. In the world of data analysis, 24 hours is an eternity. It is enough time to download a history. It is enough time to trace a transaction. It is enough time to burn a system to the ground. I looked at the first entry in my spreadsheet, dated 5 years ago. Silver sedan. Source, Grandma's transmission check. I am not snitching, I whispered to the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I am reporting a bug in the system, and I am going to fix it. The clock on my bedside table read 3 a.m. My 24-hour eviction notice was ticking down, dissolving like sugar in hot tea. A normal person would have been packing boxes, taping them shut with the desperate, frantic energy of someone who had just lost their home. A normal person would be crying over old yearbooks or folding sweaters into suitcases. But I was not feeling normal. I was feeling cold. It was a precise, clinical kind of coldness, the temperature of a server room. I did not pack a single sock. Instead, I moved through the silent house like a ghost haunting the people who had murdered her. The house was asleep, or at least, it pretended to be. The floorboards settled with groans that sounded like footsteps, and the refrigerator hummed its low, electric song downstairs. I sat at my small desk, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating my face in ghostly blue. I had spent the last 6 hours conducting a forensic audit of my own life. The suspicion had started earlier that day, a few hours before the disastrous birthday dinner, though I had not registered it fully until now. I had been looking out the kitchen window when the mailman arrived. Usually, he dropped the bundle in the box by the road. But today, he had walked up the driveway with a thick, padded envelope. Vanessa had practically sprinted out the front door to meet him. She had not just taken the mail. She had snatched it. When she came back inside, she did not toss the pile on the kitchen island where the bills usually accumulated. She had marched straight upstairs to the master bedroom, the envelope tucked tight under her arm like a stolen football. At the time, I thought maybe she had ordered something embarrassing, maybe wrinkle cream, maybe something for her thinning hair. Now, staring at the cursor blinking on my screen, I realized how naive I had been. I needed water. My throat was parched, scratching like sandpaper, but more than that, I needed to know what was happening in the master bedroom. I slipped out of my room. I did not wear slippers. Socks were quieter on the hardwood. I moved down the hallway, navigating the dark by memory. I knew which board creaked outside the bathroom. I knew to step close to the wall near the stairs. As I passed Grant and Vanessa's room, I heard it, a murmur of voices. They were awake. I froze, pressing my back against the floral wallpaper. I held my breath, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "We have to be careful." Grant's voice drifted through the crack under the door. It was low, rough with sleep, or maybe whiskey. "If she leaves, we lose the leverage." "She is not going to leave," Vanessa scoffed. Her voice was sharper, clearer. "She has nowhere to go. She is terrified of the world. She will beg to stay. And even if she goes, it does not matter. As long as the old woman does not know we are using Lena's name, the money keeps flowing." My blood turned to ice. Using Lena's name. The phrase hung in the air, vibrating in my ears. It was not using Lena's money. It was using Lena's name. What did that mean? Grant mumbled something I could not catch. Something about risks and signatures. "Don't be a coward, Grant," Vanessa hissed. "We have been doing it for 2 years. She hasn't noticed a thing. She is too busy playing the martyr to check the paperwork. As long as we control the mail, we control the narrative." I backed away slowly, one silent step at a time, until I was safe in the kitchen. I didn't get water. I gripped the edge of the granite counter, the stone cold under my clammy palms. They weren't just taking my rent money, they were impersonating me. I ran back upstairs, softer than a shadow. I locked my bedroom door. I sat down at my computer and opened a new incognito window. My hands were shaking so badly I mistyped my own password twice. I logged into my primary bank account. It was the one I used for everything. My paycheck from Pixel Harbor Lab, the bills, the groceries. The balance was pathetic, hovering around $400. I clicked on the Profile and Settings tab. I needed to see the full picture. I navigated to the section labeled Linked Accounts. Usually, this section was empty. I didn't have investments. I didn't have savings. But tonight, there was a line item I had never seen before. Premier Checking, ending in 4092. I stared at it. I blinked. Sure, it was a glitch. I clicked on it. The account details expanded. It was not a local account. It was opened at a branch of a national bank in Rhode Island. Rhode Island. That was where Grandma Eleanor lived. I felt sick. A physical wave of nausea rolled through me. I clicked View Statements. The screen filled with rows of transactions. My eyes scanned the numbers, trying to make sense of the data. Deposit, $5,000. Source, Fox Legacy Holdings. Withdrawal, $5,000. Method, transfer to external account. Deposit, $8,000. Source, Fox Legacy Holdings. Withdrawal, $8,000. Method, cashier's check. It went on, page after page, for 2 years. The deposits were irregular but substantial. Sometimes it was $2,000, sometimes $10, all from Fox Legacy Holdings. I Googled the name in a separate tab. Fox Legacy Holdings. Nothing much came up. Just a generic landing page for a private asset management firm. But the name Fox, that was Grandma's maiden name. That was the family name. I went back to the statement. I clicked on one of the withdrawal images to view the canceled check. The digital image loaded slowly, line by line, like a horror movie revealing its monster. It was a check for $12,000. The date was 6 months ago. The memo line was written in a hurried, spiky scrawl. Medical advance, emergency surgery. My hand flew to my mouth. Grant's heart surgery. He had told me his insurance covered it, but he had to pay a high deductible. I had paid $5,000 of my own money to help him. But this check said $12,000, and it wasn't from his account. It was from this secret account in my name. I looked at the signature line at the bottom right. Lena Harrow. I stopped breathing. It was my name. It looked like my signature. The loop of the L was large and sweeping. The H was crossed high. To a bank teller who didn't know me, it would look perfect. But I was a UX designer. I spent my life looking at pixels, at kerning, at the way lines intersected. I knew the architecture of my own hand. The dot on the I was a circle. I never dotted my I's with circles. That was something a teenager did, or something Vanessa did when she was trying to be cute. The slant of the R in Harrow was too sharp, leaning backward just a fraction of a degree too much. It was a forgery, a good one, but a forgery nonetheless. I clicked through more checks. Memo. Property repairs. Roof. Amount. $15,000. I had paid for the roof. I had written a check to the contractor for $10,000. They had withdrawn $50,000. Where did the extra $5,000 go? Memo. Family investment. Business startup. Amount. $20,000. What business? Grant didn't work. Landon didn't work. My mind raced. They had opened this account in my name, likely using my social security number, which Grant had access to from tax seasons past. They were having Grandma, or this entity Fox Legacy Holdings, deposit money into it, money that was presumably meant for me, or for us, but directed to me. And then they were draining it dry, signing my name, and spending it on God knew what. And if the bank ever investigated? If the IRS ever audited? The account was in my name. The signature said Lena Harrow. I was the one who would go to jail. Grant's words echoed in my head. Stop snitching. You want to send your stepmother to jail? It was projection. Pure, psychological projection. They weren't afraid I would send them to jail for hitting me. They were afraid I would send them to jail for fraud. I grabbed my phone. I didn't trust the cloud. Not yet. I took photos of the screen, capturing every statement, every fake signature, every lie in the memo line. My hands were steady now. The shock had burned off, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. I needed more. The bank statements proved the theft, but they didn't prove the intent. They didn't prove the coordination. I needed to get on Grant's computer. The family desktop was in the study downstairs. It was a shared space, theoretically, but Grant treated it as his personal command center. I checked the time. 4:15. The house was still silent. I crept downstairs. The stairs were treacherous, but I moved on the edges of the steps where the wood was supported by the beams, making no sound. The study was cold. The blinds were drawn tight. I sat in Grant's leather chair, the chair I had bought him for Christmas 3 years ago, and woke the computer. It asked for a password. I stared at the prompt. Grant wasn't a complex man. He was arrogant. Arrogant people rarely used complex passwords. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried Vanessa's birthday. Incorrect. I tried password 123. Incorrect. I paused. I thought about what mattered to Grant. What did he love? He loved the house. He loved the idea of ownership. I typed, "My house 1." The screen unlocked. I almost laughed out loud. It was pathetic. I went straight to the file explorer. Grant was disorganized. His desktop was a clutter of shortcuts and downloaded PDFs. I scanned the folders. Taxes 2020. Car insurance. Recipes. I opened documents. Nothing obvious. I opened downloads. It was a mess of setup files and old memes he forwarded to his friends. Then I saw it. A folder named June BBQ Pics. We hadn't had a barbecue in June. It rained the entire month of June. I double-clicked the folder. There were no photos inside. There were 6 PDF files. I opened the first one. It was a scanned document, bearing the letterhead of a law firm in Manhattan. Subject: Advanced Distribution Authorization. I read the legal jargon, my eyes skimming for the important bits. Pursuant to the request of the guardians, due to the beneficiary's current incapacity and financial distress. Incapacity? I read on. Grant and Vanessa Harrow, acting as guardians for Lena Harrow, are authorized to receive the advanced distribution of funds from the Fox Family Trust to cover necessary living expenses and medical treatments. Guardians. They had told the trust, they had told Grandma, that I was incapacitated, that I couldn't handle my own money, that I needed guardians. I was 30 years old. I had a full-time job. I paid their mortgage. I scrolled to the bottom. There it was again, my signature, Lena Harrow, but next to it, signed as witnesses and guardians, Grant Harrow and Vanessa Harrow. They had legally declared me incompetent to steal my inheritance while I was living under their roof, paying their bills. I opened the next file. It was a letter from Grant to someone named Marcus Hale. Dear Mr. Hale, Lena is doing better, but she is still very fragile. The therapy is expensive. We appreciate your discretion in handling the distributions directly through the secondary account to avoid stressing her with financial details. She gets very confused. Confused, fragile. They were gaslighting my grandmother. They were painting a picture of me as a mentally unstable invalid who needed their constant, expensive care. That was why they intercepted the mail. That was why they monitored my calls. That was why stop snitching was the holiest law in the house. If I spoke to Grandma for 5 minutes without their supervision, the entire house of cards would collapse. She would hear my clear voice. She would hear my sanity. She would know. I took out my phone again. I photographed the screen. I zoomed in on the paragraph about my incapacity. I photographed the letter to Marcus Hale. I was about to open the third file when I heard a noise. Footsteps, not upstairs, right outside the door. My heart stopped. The doorknob turned. I didn't have time to close the window. I didn't have time to lock the computer. I did the only thing I could think of. I clicked on the web browser icon on the taskbar, which was already open, and maximized it. It covered the PDF instantly. The door creaked open. Landon stood there. He was wearing boxers and a t-shirt, scratching his stomach, his eyes bleary with sleep. The light from the hallway spilled into the room. "Lena?" he grunted. "What are you doing?" I forced my shoulders to drop. I forced a casual, slightly annoyed expression onto my face. I turned to him, keeping my body between him and the screen. "I couldn't sleep," I said. My voice sounded surprisingly steady. Though my pulse was deafening in my ears, I was just looking for photos. "Photos?" Landon frowned. "It is 4 a.m. "For my profile," I said quickly. "Since I'm moving out tomorrow, I thought I should update my dating profile. New start, right? Maybe I can find a rich husband like Mom says I should." I tried to sound like the ditz they wanted me to be, the desperate, single spinster. Landon snorted. He leaned against the doorframe, looking at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. "Good luck with that," he said. "You look like a raccoon." "Thanks, Landon," I said dryly. "Go back to bed." He yawned, stretching his arms over his head. "You really leaving tomorrow?" "Grant said so," I replied. "Yeah," he said, "probably for the best. Mom is really pissed about the cake thing." He turned and shuffled away toward the kitchen, probably to hunt for leftovers. I waited until his footsteps faded. I turned back to the screen. I minimized the browser. The PDF was still there, staring at me with its damning evidence. I didn't push my luck. I ejected the thumb drive I had plugged in, just in case I could copy files, though I hadn't risked it yet, and shut down the window. I left the computer exactly as I found it. I went back upstairs, my legs feeling like jelly. I locked my door again and leaned against it, sliding down until I hit the floor. I sat there in the dark, hugging my knees. The picture was complete now. The abuse, the slaps, the isolation. It wasn't just cruelty, it was maintenance. It was the necessary overhead cost of running a fraudulent enterprise. I wasn't a daughter to them. I wasn't even a person. I was a ghost corporation. I was a shell company with a pulse. They had stolen my name. They had stolen my relationship with my grandmother. They had stolen 2 years of my financial life. And tomorrow, they were going to kick me out to the curb, cut me loose, and keep cashing the checks. They probably planned to tell Grandma I had run away, or that I had been institutionalized, to explain my absence while they kept collecting the guardian fees. I looked at the phone in my hand. It was heavy with gigabytes of evidence. Grant had said, "Stop snitching." He had no idea. Snitching was for schoolyard tattletales. I wasn't going to snitch. I was going to file a report. I was going to launch an audit. I was going to bring the full weight of the legal system down on this house until the foundation cracked. I stood up. The sun would be up in 2 hours. I had work to do. The sun was beginning to bleed gray light through the blinds, turning the room into a hazy, washed-out confession booth. I sat on the floor, my back against the door, staring at the phone in my hand. The evidence I had gathered in the last few hours, the bank statements, the forged signatures, the guardianship papers, felt radioactive. I knew I had enough to blow the house up, metaphorically speaking, but I also knew that Grant and Vanessa were desperate people. Desperate people are dangerous. If I made a move and missed, if I tried to confront them without a shield, they would crush me. I needed a shield. I needed a sword. I needed Jenna Ruiz. Jenna and I had been roommates in college before life took us in drastically different directions. I went into design and family trauma. She went to law school and then straight into the throat-cutting world of civil litigation in Oakbridge. We hadn't spoken in 6 months, mostly because Grant made it impossible for me to maintain friendships. But I knew Jenna. I knew that if I called her at 5 a.m. with a crisis, she wouldn't ask why I was waking her up. She would ask who she needed to destroy. My thumb hovered over the video call button. Shame washed over me, hot and suffocating. Calling Jenna meant admitting the truth. It meant admitting that the smart, independent Lena she knew had been reduced to a punching bag living in her father's attic. It meant showing her the bruise. I took a deep breath, walked to the mirror, and grabbed a makeup wipe. I scrubbed the concealer off my cheek. The bruise from Vanessa's slap was blooming beautifully, a violent purple flower with yellow edges. It was ugly. It was real. I hit the call button. The screen was dark for 3 rings, and then Jenna's face appeared. She was in bed, her hair a chaotic mess, eyes squinting against the sudden light of her phone. "Lena?" she rasped. "It is 5 a.m. Is everything okay?" I didn't say a word. I just moved my face closer to the camera, letting the harsh light from my desk lamp illuminate the swelling on my jaw. Jenna's sleepiness evaporated instantly. She sat up, the sheets rustling. Her eyes widened, scanning my face with the precision of a scanner. "Who did that?" she asked. Her voice was not soft. It was hard, cold, and instantly alert. "Vanessa," I whispered. Jenna didn't gasp. She didn't offer platitudes. She reached for something off camera, glasses, probably, and slid them on. "Talk," she said. "Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." And so I did. For the first time in 5 years, the dam broke. I told her everything. I told her about the phrase "stop snitching" and how it had become the anthem of my life. I told her about the isolation, the way Grant monitored my calls, the way they filtered the mail. I told her about the rent I paid that covered their entire lifestyle. I told her about the slap in the kitchen and the eviction notice for tomorrow. Then, I told her about what I had found tonight. I told her about the hidden account in Rhode Island. I told her about the $12,000 for the heart surgery that I had paid for twice. I told her about the Fox Legacy Holdings deposits. I told her about the PDF I had seen on Grant's computer declaring me incapacitated. Jenna listened in silence. She didn't interrupt. She was taking notes. I could hear the scratching of a pen on paper. When I finished, the silence stretched for a long 10 seconds. "Lena," Jenna said finally, her voice terrifyingly calm, "you are not just a victim of domestic abuse. You are the victim of a sophisticated, multi-year conspiracy to defraud a trust and commit identity theft." I shivered. Hearing it laid out like that made it real in a way my own internal monologue hadn't. "They told Grandma I was crazy?" I asked, my voice trembling. "They did worse than that," Jenna said. She looked down at her notes. "They established a constructive fraud. By claiming you are incapacitated, they appointed themselves as your de facto guardians. That allows them to intercept funds meant for you without technically stealing them in the eyes of the sender, provided they claim it is for your care. But the moment they forged your signature on those checks and used the money for roof repairs and personal debts, they crossed the line into embezzlement and grand larceny. She looked up at the camera, her dark eyes fierce. And the violence? The stop snitching rule? That is not just bad parenting. That is witness intimidation. That is coercive control designed to protect a criminal enterprise. My head was spinning. I had thought I was just a daughter they didn't love. It turned out I was a business model they were protecting. What do I do? I asked. Grant wants me out by noon. He said he transferred the deed to Vanessa and Landon. Jenna let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a mean sound. He is lying, she said. What? Give me 2 minutes, she said. Keep the line open. I watched as she typed furiously on a laptop I couldn't see. The clicking of her mechanical keyboard was the only sound in the room. Okay, she said, her face bathed in the white glow of her screen. I am looking at the county property records for Maple Ridge right now. Public access database. She paused, scrolling. Grant didn't transfer the deed to Vanessa. She said he couldn't have, because Grant doesn't own the house. I blinked, but he has lived here for 20 years. He says it is his house. He is a liar, Jenna said. The property is held in a trust. The owner of record is the Fox Family Revocable Trust, with Eleanor Fox listed as the grantor. Grant is likely listed as a life tenant or a trustee with residency rights, but he does not hold the title. He cannot transfer it to anyone. My jaw dropped. The threat, "Get out of my house," was empty. He had no legal standing to kick me out of a house he didn't own. So why the rush? I asked. Why kick me out now? Because they are scared, Jenna replied. She leaned into the camera. Think about it. Lena, if the house belongs to the Fox Trust, then Grandma Eleanor holds the strings. If Grant is trying to kick you out, it is probably because he is afraid you are about to trigger a clause in that trust that would hurt him. A clause? Trusts like this usually have conditions, she explained, especially if they are set up by wealthy matriarchs. There might be a bad boy clause, or a stipulation that the house must be used to shelter family members. If you leave, maybe he gets full control. Or maybe, just maybe, the stop snitching rule exists because there is a specific clause about abuse. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Jenna continued, her voice lowering. If Eleanor Fox is the billionaire you suspect she is, she has lawyers way more expensive than me writing her documents. She would have protected her assets. Grant isn't just abusing you to be mean. He is abusing you to keep you from activating a tripwire in the trust that would cut him off. I felt a surge of anger so hot it almost burned. They had made me feel like a parasite in a house that was likely intended for my protection. So I stay? I asked. I tell him I know. No, Jenna said sharply. Absolutely not. You do not show your hand yet. If you confront him now, he will panic. He might destroy evidence. He might get violent again, and this time it could be worse than a slap. We need to build a fortress of evidence so high they can't climb over it. She started rattling off instructions, her lawyer brain shifting into high gear. Do not delete anything, she commanded. I want you to go back to that computer. Can you get access again? I can try, I said, but I don't have the admin password for installing software. You are a UX designer, Jenna said. You know workarounds. Find a screen recording software that runs from a portable executable file on a USB drive. No installation needed. Set it to launch on startup and hide the tray icon. I nodded. I could do that. It was simple. I want to see every keystroke, Jenna said. I want to see him logging into that fake bank account. I want to see him emailing the trust officers. Okay, I said, my mind already working through the technical steps. What else? Record everything, she said. Every conversation, every threat. If Vanessa whispers in your ear, I want it on tape. If Landon makes a joke about the money, I want it. In this state, we are a one-party consent jurisdiction for recording, which means as long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it without telling them. She paused, looking at the bruise on my face again. "And Lena," she said softly, "do not cover that up. Take photos. High resolution. Every day as it heals. That is assault. It is a felony." I touched my cheek. "I'm not going to hide it," I said. "Not anymore." "Good," Jenna said. "Now, here is the most important part. You need to talk to Eleanor." "I can't," I said, frustration rising. "Grant blocks the calls. He stands right there." "Then you bypass him," Jenna said. "You said she sends emails sometimes?" "Yes, but Grant checks the family account." "Does she have a personal one?" Jenna asked. "A private one she might have slipped you years ago? Or can you find her on social media? A woman with a legacy holding company has a digital footprint." I thought back, years ago, before the control tightened. Grandma had given me an email address written on the back of a recipe card for apple pie. Private@gmail. I had never used it because Grant insisted we use the family address so Grandma doesn't get confused. "I think I have one," I said. "Write to her," Jenna ordered, "but do not just send a sob story. Do not just write, 'Dad is mean.' Send the evidence. Send the photo of your face. Send the photo of the bank statement. Send the PDF where they call you incapacitated." She leaned in closer to the screen. "Make it a report. Lena, treat it like a user experience audit of your family. Show her the data. If she is the woman who built an empire, she respects facts. Give her the facts that prove her son is a thief and a liar." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm settling over me. I wasn't helpless. I had a mission. Jenna checked her watch. "I am going to pull every public record I can find on Fox Legacy Holdings and the trust," she said. "I will map out the asset structure. You handle the ground war inside the house." She looked at me, her expression softening for the first time. "We are going to bury them. Lena," she promised, "but you have to be an actress for a few more days. Can you do that? Can you pretend to be the scared little girl for 48 more hours?" I thought about the years of silence. I thought about the money I had poured into the black hole of Grant's greed. I thought about the way Vanessa looked at me when she slapped me, like I was an insect she wanted to crush. "I can do it," I said. Jenna smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. "Then let's go to work." She ended the call. The screen went black, leaving me alone in the silence of my room. But the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt pregnant with possibility. I stood up. The sun was fully up now. I could hear movement downstairs. The smell of coffee was drifting up the ventilation shafts. Grant's morning ritual. I walked over to my closet. I didn't reach for the high-necked sweater I usually wore to hide my skin. I reached for a simple t-shirt. I didn't reach for the concealer. I sat down at my desk and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. I wrote down the timeline Jenna needed. Then I opened my laptop and began to code a simple script for a portable screen recorder. It took me 20 minutes. I loaded it onto a flash drive. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The bruise throbbed. A dull, heavy ache. I looked at myself in the mirror. The girl looking back wasn't the sad, defeated daughter of Grant Harrow. She was the lead investigator in a case against him. I slipped the flash drive into my pocket. It was time to go downstairs and play my part. I would apologize. I would beg. I would cry. And while they gloated, while they basked in their victory, I would be tightening the noose around their necks, one bite of data at a time. I opened my bedroom door and stepped out into the hallway. "Good morning. Family." I thought, let the games begin. I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitor the only light in the room. My hands were surprisingly steady as I dug through the digital archives of my life. I was looking for a needle in a haystack, a specific conversation from 6 years ago, back before the walls had closed in, back before Grant had severed the lines of communication. I searched for the keyword. Grandma. Hundreds of emails popped up, mostly forwarded chains from Grant with subjects like FWD, photos from the lake, or FWD, update on Lena. But I scrolled past those. I went back to a time when I was 24, just before I moved back into this house. I found it. It was buried in a thread about a pumpkin pie recipe. Buried at the very bottom, in a font so small it looked like a mistake, was a single line from Eleanor Fox. "Lena, if you ever need to speak to me where your father cannot hear, use this. foxprivate@gmail.com. Keep it just for us." I stared at the address. I remembered reading it years ago and thinking it was just a quirky request from an old woman who valued her privacy. I had never used it. I had trusted my father then. I had trusted the system. Now, that email address looked like a lifeline thrown across a turbulent ocean. I opened a new compose window. My fingers hovered over the keys. Jenna's advice rang in my ears. Do not send a sob story. Make it a report. I typed the subject line, Status Report, Lena Harrow, Financial and Physical Safety Audit. I did not write Dear Grandma. I did not ask how her garden was. I stripped the emotion out of my words until only the cold, hard bones of the truth remained. Item 1, I typed, Physical Abuse Documentation. I attached the high-resolution photos of my face, taken 10 minutes ago in the harsh bathroom light. The bruise was a blooming violet galaxy on my jaw. I attached photos of the older bruises on my arms, the ones I had documented months ago but never showed anyone. Item 2. I continued. Financial irregularities. I attached the screenshots of the secret Rhode Island bank account. I highlighted the transaction dates. I attached the images of the checks with the forged signatures, the loops of the letters too wide, the pressure of the pen too heavy to be mine. Item 3, I concluded. Unauthorized guardianship claims. I attached the PDF I had stolen from Grant's computer, the one declaring me incapacitated and naming Grant and Vanessa as my guardians. I wrote a single closing sentence. I have been told that if I speak to you, the shock will kill you. I am speaking to you now because I believe the silence is killing me. I am being evicted tomorrow at noon. I hit send. The swoosh of the email leaving my outbox sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. I sat back, expecting a long wait. I expected days of silence. I expected that maybe the email address was dead, abandoned years ago like so many things in this family. But the response came in 45 minutes. My computer pinged. A new message appeared. It was not from Fox, private. It was from a secure server, hale@haleandpartners.com. The subject line was, Status Report. Immediate action required. I opened it, my heart hammering against my ribs. Ms. Harrow. I am Marcus Hale. I am the primary legal counsel for Eleanor Fox and the trustee of the Fox Family Revocable Trust. Your grandmother is sitting beside me. She has read your email. Please read the following very carefully. 1. Fox Legacy Holdings is a private investment vehicle solely owned by Eleanor Fox. The distributions made to the account ending in 4092 were authorized by Mrs. DeFox specifically for the purpose of creating an independence fund for you, Lena Harrow. They were intended to be a nest egg for your future home purchase and professional development. They were never intended for household maintenance, medical bills for third parties, or general consumption by Grant or Vanessa Harrow. I stopped reading. The air left my lungs. An independence fund. For 5 years, I had scraped together pennies to buy groceries. I had forgone dental checkups to pay the electric bill. I had felt guilty for every slice of bread I ate in this house. And all the while, there had been tens of thousands of dollars sent specifically for me, money to set me free. Grant hadn't just stolen money. He had stolen my exit strategy. He had stolen my dignity. I forced myself to read on. 2. The document declaring you incapacitated is a fabrication. We have no record of any medical evaluation supporting such a claim, and the trust never received a valid court order granting guardianship. If Grant Harrow represented himself as your guardian to financial institutions to access these funds, he has committed federal wire fraud and identity theft. 3. Under the terms of the trust, any interference with a beneficiary's communication with the grantor, your grandmother, constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty. The threats regarding your grandmother's health were a manipulation tactic used to facilitate this breach. Mrs. Fox wishes to speak with you. but I have advised against a call at this immediate juncture to protect the integrity of the evidence. We are currently filing flight plans. We will be arriving in your state within 48 hours. Mrs. Fox insists on inspecting the property and the situation personally before we execute the next legal step. Until we arrive, you are to say nothing. Do not confront your father. Do not alert them that the veil has been lifted. Your safety is paramount. If you feel you are in immediate physical danger, leave the premises and call the police. Otherwise, hold your position. Signed, Marcus Hale. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Hold your position. It was a military command. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was an operative behind enemy lines. I closed the laptop. It was 10 in the morning. Downstairs, I could hear the sounds of the house waking up. Vanessa was blending a smoothie, the noise of the machine grinding fruit sounding violent and abrasive. Grant was likely on the patio, smoking his morning cigar, looking out over the lawn he thought he owned. I needed to know more. Marcus had confirmed the money fraud, but the house was still a puzzle. Grant had claimed he transferred the deed. Jenna said he couldn't because it was in a trust. But if it was in a trust, why did Grant act like he was the king of the castle? Why did he feel safe enough to kick me out? I needed to see the paperwork he kept in the house. I knew where the computer files were, but Grant was old-fashioned. He didn't trust the cloud with everything. He kept the real papers, the birth certificates, the deeds, the insurance policies, in a physical safe. It was a small wall safe hidden behind a generic landscape painting in his bedroom. I had seen Vanessa opening it once, years ago, when she thought I was at work. I waited until noon. Grant took his truck to run errands, which usually meant driving to the next town to buy lottery tickets. Vanessa went into the backyard to sunbathe, wearing her oversized sunglasses and headphones. The house was mine. I moved quickly. I slipped into the master bedroom. It smelled of stale cigar smoke and Vanessa's overpowering perfume. I went straight to the painting, a dull oil depiction of a barn that had hung there for as long as I could remember. I swung the frame away from the wall. The safe was there. A digital keypad stared back at me. I didn't have the code. I stood there, my mind racing. Jenna had said to think like a user experience designer. People are predictable. They choose passwords that mean something to them. I thought about Grant. What mattered to him? Himself, his money, Vanessa. I tried his birthday. Error. I tried the last 4 digits of his social security number. Error. I tried the year he bought the new car. Error. The safe beeped an angry red warning. One more try and it would lock me out for an hour. I closed my eyes and thought about the conversation I had overheard between Landon and Grant a few months ago. Landon had been mocking Grant for being whipped by Vanessa. "You are obsessed with her, Dad." Landon had laughed. "You probably used the day you met her as your PIN code." Grant had turned red and told him to shut up. Not the day they met. That was too obscure. The day they got married. I remembered the date because it was the day I realized I had lost my father completely. It was June 12th, 5 years ago. I punched in 061215. The mechanism whirred. The lock clicked. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I pulled the heavy door open. Inside, there were stacks of cash, probably skimming from the household budget I provided. There were passports, and there was a thick leather binder. I pulled the binder out. I sat on the edge of their bed and flipped it open. The first document was the Harrow Residence Occupancy Agreement. I scanned the text. My eyes widened. This agreement is made between the Fox Family Revocable Trust, the owner, and Grant and Vanessa Harrow, the caretakers. Caretakers. The owner grants the caretakers the right to reside at the property located at 442 Maple Drive for the sole purpose of providing a stable, safe, and supportive environment for the primary beneficiary, Lena Harrow. I read the line again. Sole purpose of providing a stable, safe, and supportive environment for the primary beneficiary, Lena Harrow. They weren't the owners. They weren't even tenants in the traditional sense. They were live-in staff. Their entire right to live in this house, to sleep in this bed, to swim in the pool, was contingent on them taking care of me. If I moved out, their claim to the house evaporated. That explained why they had never kicked me out before. That explained why they needed me here, paying the bills, playing the role of the struggling daughter. I wasn't a parasite. I was the host. I was the anchor that kept the roof over their heads. So why kick me out now? I flipped the page. Behind the occupancy agreement was another document. This one was marked Draft, Amendment to Occupancy Terms. It was dated 2 weeks ago. The owner agrees to amend the primary beneficiary designation from Lena Harrow to Landon Harrow, due to Lena Harrow's permanent departure from the residence and forfeiture of claim. I felt a chill run down my spine. There were notes in the margins in Grant's handwriting. Need to get Lena to sign the departure waiver. Need to prove she is unstable so Mom agrees to the switch. They were trying to swap me out. They wanted to replace me with Landon. If they could prove I was crazy, or if they could force me to sign a paper saying I was leaving voluntarily to find myself, they could petition the trust to make Landon the new primary beneficiary they needed to care for. That was why the eviction was happening now. That was why the urgency. They must have sent the draft to the trust, or maybe to a contact they thought would help them, and they needed me gone to make the paperwork match the reality. And the stop snitching rule? It wasn't just about the abuse. It was about keeping me ignorant of my own power. If I had known I was the reason they had a house, I would have kicked them out years ago. If I had known the house was legally tied to my well-being, I could have called Marcus Hale and had them evicted in 24 hours. They had taken a queen and convinced her she was a pawn. I took photos of everything: the occupancy agreement, the draft amendment with Grant's scribbled notes, the stacks of cash in the safe. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I wiped the keypad with the hem of my shirt to remove my fingerprints. I swung the painting back into place. I slipped out of the room and went back to my own quarters. I sat on my bed, my hands trembling, but not from fear. I was shaking with rage. For 5 years, I had walked on eggshells. I had apologized for existing. I had thanked them for letting me stay in their house. All this time, they were guests in my sanctuary. I looked at the email from Marcus Hale again. We will be arriving within 48 hours. Tomorrow was the deadline. Grant expected me to leave. I checked the time. It was 1 in the afternoon. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I looked at the bruise again. It was no longer a mark of shame. It was a receipt. It was the proof that the caretakers had violated the one condition of their residency. They had failed to provide a safe environment. I heard the back door slide open downstairs. Vanessa was coming in from her sunbathing. "Lena!" she yelled up the stairs. "Get down here and start dinner. We are celebrating your last night." Celebrating my last night. The cruelty was breathtaking. I smoothed my shirt. I put on my best mask of submission. "I am coming. Vanessa!" I called back, my voice cracking just enough to sound pathetic. I went downstairs to cook their dinner. I would chop the vegetables. I would serve the wine. I would let them gloat. Because I knew something they didn't. The helicopter was coming, and when it landed, it wasn't just going to bring a billionaire, it was going to bring the end of their world. I retreated to my room after dinner, leaving Grant and Vanessa to finish the bottle of wine I had poured for them. They were in high spirits, toasting to their future, a future they believed was secured by my imminent departure. Downstairs, I was the defeated daughter, the parasite finally being purged. Upstairs, in the glow of my laptop screen, I was learning that I was the heiress to an empire I hadn't known existed. A new email from Marcus Hale sat in my inbox. Attached was a single file. Fox Family Trust Summary, redacted, PDF. I opened it, expecting to see a modest portfolio. Grant had spent my entire life painting a very specific picture of his mother. She was a widow on a fixed income. He would say, "She has a little bit of savings from Grandpa's life insurance, but we have to be careful not to drain it." It was the narrative that justified everything. The pinching of pennies, the guilt trips when I asked for help, the constant fear that one wrong move would leave her destitute. I scrolled to the second page, to the section labeled Asset Valuation. I stopped breathing. I actually stopped. My heart gave a singular hard thump against my ribs and then paused. The number was not in the thousands. It was not in the millions. Estimated total value, $350 million. I blinked, sure that I was misreading the zeros. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. 350 million. I scrolled down to the breakdown of assets. Fox Legacy Holdings was not just a small investment account, it was a quiet giant. There were substantial equity stakes in major technology firms in Silicon Valley. There were commercial real estate holdings in Boston, Seattle, and Austin. There were patent royalties from medical devices I recognized from my own design work. My grandmother wasn't just a pensioner with a nice garden. She was a titan. She was a silent billionaire who had built a fortress of wealth while wearing cardigans and baking apple pies. And Grant knew. He had to know, or maybe he didn't know the full extent, but he knew enough to know that the fixed income story was a lie he told me to keep me paying his bills. He had let me work double shifts, let me panic over grocery prices, let me drain my own savings to fix a roof on a multi-million-dollar estate, all while sitting on a potential inheritance that could buy the entire town of Maple Ridge. I felt a wave of dizziness. The scale of the deception was so vast it made me nauseous. But it was the next section that Marcus had highlighted in yellow that truly changed the gravity of the room. Section 12, Paragraph 4, The Truth and Safety Covenant. I leaned in, reading the legal text. To ensure the safety and moral integrity of the beneficiaries, this trust incorporates a mandatory disclosure clause, hereafter referred to as the Truth Clause. Any beneficiary found to be concealing acts of domestic violence, physical or emotional abuse, or financial malfeasance committed by another beneficiary shall immediately forfeit their right to distributions. Furthermore, any beneficiary found to be engaging in coercive silencing, defined as the use of threats, intimidation, or manipulation to prevent another beneficiary from communicating with the grantor or the trustee, shall be permanently disinherited and removed from any residency privileges associated with trust properties. I read the phrase again, coercive silencing. My hands started to shake. Stop snitching. It wasn't just a bully's command. It was the exact behavior that this clause was designed to punish. Grant and Vanessa hadn't just been mean. They had been actively violating the core constitutional law of our family's wealth. They had told me that speaking up would destroy the family. The document in front of me said the exact opposite. Speaking up was the only way to save my place in it. A new email popped up. It was from Marcus, explaining the context. Lena, he wrote, your grandmother insisted on this clause 40 years ago. She lived through a difficult marriage before she met your grandfather. She knows how silence is used as a weapon. She knows that abusers rely on the victim's shame to keep their secrets. She wrote this clause to ensure that no grandchild of hers would ever feel they had to choose between their inheritance and their safety. The stop snitching rule your father enforced was likely a desperate attempt to prevent you from triggering this specific mechanism. He knows about the clause. He has been terrified of it for decades. I felt tears prick my eyes, not tears of sadness, but tears of validation. For 5 years, I had thought I was weak for staying silent. I thought I was protecting everyone, but Grandma Eleanor had built a safety net for me decades before I was even born, anticipating this very moment. She hadn't abandoned me. She had just been waiting for me to pull the alarm. Then, a second message arrived. This one was from Fox, private. It was short. There was no subject line. It was typed in a larger font, likely so she could see it without her reading glasses. Lena. If someone tells you to be silent, especially about money or violence, that is the sign that you must speak louder. I will listen. Tell me everything. Do not leave out the ugly parts. Love, Grandma. I stared at the cursor blinking on the screen. Tell me everything. I opened a blank document. I cracked my knuckles. And then, I began to type. I didn't write like a UX designer this time. I didn't use bullet points or sterile language. I wrote like a woman who had been holding her breath for 5 years. I wrote about the first time Vanessa slapped me, 3 months after I moved in. because I had bought the wrong brand of coffee. I wrote about how Grant had watched it happen and then told me to go put ice on it so the neighbors wouldn't see. I wrote about the time Vanessa slammed my hand in the drawer because I asked about the missing grocery money. I described the sound of my own knuckles crunching. I described how she smiled and said I was clumsy. I wrote about the nights I spent locked in the laundry room because Grant had guests over and didn't want his failure of a daughter embarrassing him. I wrote about the threats. If you tell your grandmother, she will die of a heart attack and it will be your fault. If you tell her, we will be homeless. If you tell her, you are dead to us. I wrote about the rent payments. I calculated the total amount I had paid them over 5 years, $120,000. I wrote about the medical bills I paid, the car repairs, the vacations they took while I stayed home to watch the house. I poured it all out, every slap, every insult, every stolen dollar. When I finished, I felt lightheaded. I saved the file as the Truth PDF and sent it to Marcus and Eleanor. 20 minutes later, Marcus replied. He had copied Jenna on the email. Received. He wrote, "This is sufficient. This constitutes a sworn affidavit in the eyes of the trust. Jenna, please proceed with preparing the filing for the restraining order and the petition for removal of trustees based on this evidence." Jenna's reply came fast, her tone professional but cutting. "I am reviewing the affidavit now. Based on this, we have clear grounds for multiple criminal charges. We are looking at constructive fraud, embezzlement of trust funds, assault and battery, and coercive control. I am drafting the complaint now. We will be ready to file the moment you give the signal." Then came the instruction that terrified me the most. "Lena," Marcus wrote, "your grandmother and I will be landing in Maple Ridge in 2 days. However, Eleanor has made a specific request. She does not want Grant or Vanessa to know she is coming, and she absolutely does not want them to know that she is wealthy. She wants to arrive as the frail old woman they believe her to be. She wants to see them in their natural state. She wants to see how they treat you when they think no one of consequence is watching. You must maintain the charade. Tomorrow. Act as if you are defeated. Act as if you are leaving. Let them believe their plan has worked. We need them to feel safe enough to show their true colors one last time." I closed the laptop. I had to act. I had to go back to being the victim. I stood up and looked in the mirror. My face was still swollen. My eyes were red from the screen glare. I didn't need much makeup to look devastated. I walked out of my room and went to the top of the stairs. "Lena!" Grant's voice boomed from the living room. "Are you packing? I want those boxes in the hallway by morning." I gripped the banister. Every instinct in my body wanted to scream at him. I wanted to scream that he was a thief and a liar. I wanted to scream that I knew about the $350 million. I wanted to scream that he was living in my house. But I swallowed the scream. I forced my voice to tremble. "I am packing. Dad," I called down, "please, can I just have until the afternoon? I don't have anywhere to go yet." I heard Vanessa laugh. It was a cruel, tinkling sound. "You should have thought about that before you became such a burden." "Honey," she called back. Noon, not a minute later. I went back into my room and shut the door. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Burden. They called me a burden while spending my millions. They called me a parasite while living in my sanctuary. Let them laugh, I thought, a cold smile touching my lips in the darkness. Let them enjoy their wine. Let them think they have won. Because in 48 hours, the frail old woman was going to land in the backyard, and she wasn't bringing apple pie. She was bringing the apocalypse. I pulled up the email chain on my phone one last time, just to look at the words. Breach of fiduciary duty, constructive fraud, embezzlement, coercive control. They weren't just legal terms. They were the lyrics to a song of retribution, and I was going to make sure Grant and Vanessa heard every single note. I closed my eyes and drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of helicopters and the sound of justice arriving from the sky. The plan Jenna and Marcus devised was elegant in its simplicity, but brutal in its execution. It was a classic pincer movement. designed to cut off every possible escape route Grant and Vanessa might try to take. We were not just going to sue them, we were going to stage a piece of theater, a high-stakes performance where the audience, my father and stepmother, didn't realize they were actually the main characters in a tragedy of their own making. The setup was a family meeting. Jenna had instructed me to pitch it as a surrender. I was to tell Grant that I was overwhelmed, that I was terrified of the conflict, and that I was willing to sign whatever document he put in front of me if it meant I could leave the house without a fight. It was the bait, and Grant, blinded by his own greed and arrogance, swallowed it whole. I found him in the living room, nursing a tumbler of scotch at 2 p.m. The sun was streaming in through the windows I had paid to replace last autumn, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice small and trembling. He didn't look up from the television. "What do you want?" I have been thinking," I stammered. "I don't want to fight. I just want this to be over." He muted the TV then, turning his head slowly to look at me. His eyes were suspicious, narrowing into slits. "Meaning what?" he asked. "Meaning I will sign." I said. I took a deep breath, forcing a tear to well up in my eye. "I will sign the waiver. I will sign the release. I will sign whatever paper says I am leaving voluntarily. I want to pack my things and go. I don't want any trouble with the police or anyone." A slow, predatory smile spread across Grant's face. It was the look of a fisherman who feels the line go taut. "Finally using that brain of yours," he said, taking a sip of his drink. "I knew you would come around. You never did have the stomach for the real world. Lena." I looked down at my feet. "I just want to leave in peace," I whispered. "Fine," Grant said, standing up and clapping his hands together. "Tomorrow morning, I will get my lawyer. Well, he is a notary, but he knows the paperwork, to come over at 9. We will do it at the dining table. You sign the release of claims. You sign the statement saying you are incapacitated and need us to manage your transition, and then you can get the hell out." Incapacitated. He actually said it to my face. He was going to make me sign a confession of my own insanity just to cover his tracks. "Okay," I said softly. "Tomorrow at 9. I turned and walked away, feeling his eyes boring into my back. As soon as I was out of earshot, I heard him pick up his phone. "Vanessa," he shouted, his voice booming with triumph. "Get down here. The stupid girl finally understands. We are going to get the signature." I paused on the stairs, listening. "We need to get this done fast," Grant told her, his voice lowering but still audible to my trained ears. "Once she signs, we send the copy to the trust immediately. We can probably request another emergency loan for relocation expenses before the old woman realizes Lena is gone. We need to secure that cash flow before Grandma decides to freeze the accounts." Vanessa laughed. "It is about time. I told you she would break. She is weak. Grant, she has always been weak." I went to my room and texted Jenna. "The bait is taken. Meeting is set for 9 tomorrow." Jenna replied instantly, "Good. Keep playing dead. Do not let the mask slip." But playing dead is harder than it looks, especially when the predators decide to take one last bite. Later that evening, I went down to the kitchen to get a glass of water. The house felt charged with a frantic energy. Grant was in his study, printing documents. Vanessa was in the kitchen, aggressively rearranging the spice rack, a task she only did when she was manic with excitement. She saw me enter and stopped. Her eyes raked over me, filled with contempt. "Make sure you clean your room before you leave," she said. "I don't want to find any of your trash left behind. We are turning that room into a gym for Landon." A gym? They were already redecorating. "I will," I said quietly. "I just came for water." Vanessa stepped closer, blocking my path to the refrigerator. She smelled of wine and expensive moisturizer. "You know, you should thank us," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "We kept you here for 5 years. Most parents would have kicked a loser like you out at 25. I gripped my glass. I tried to walk past her, but she stepped sideways, mirroring my movement. I said, "I will clean the room." "Vanessa," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice, I just want to call Grandma tonight to say goodbye, to ask her permission to leave." The reaction was instantaneous. Vanessa's face twisted. The calm mask vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. "You will do no such thing," she hissed. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the tender flesh near my elbow. She spun me around and shoved me back against the counter. "We talked about this," she shouted, forgetting to whisper. "You do not call her. You do not ask for permission. You are leaving because we say you are leaving." She raised her hand. I saw it coming. I could have dodged. I could have blocked it. I had taken self-defense classes in college. I knew how to break a wrist hold. But I didn't move. I let her hand connect with the side of my head. It was a solid, open-handed strike that rattled my teeth. My head snapped back, hitting the cabinet door behind me. "Listen to me, you little rat," Vanessa snarled, leaning into my face, her breath hot on my skin. "If you pick up that phone to call Eleanor, I swear to God, you won't walk out of this house. You will be carried out. Do you understand? Stop snitching. Sign the papers. Shut your mouth. And disappear. Or I will make you wish you had never been born." I stood there, the pain throbbing in my temple. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I looked her dead in the eye. "I understand," I said. My voice was flat, cold. "Good," she spat. She released me and stormed out of the kitchen, feeling powerful, feeling victorious. As soon as she was gone, I turned slowly toward the stove. On the spice rack, nestled between a jar of dried basil and a container of cumin, was a small, black rectangle. It looked like a digital kitchen timer. It wasn't. It was a high-definition motion-activated camera I had installed yesterday, following Jenna's instructions. I reached up and tapped the hidden sync button. A tiny blue light blinked once. The footage of Vanessa hitting me, shoving me, and threatening my life if I contacted the trust owner was currently flying through the encrypted airwaves, uploading directly to a secure cloud server that only Jenna and Marcus could access. I pulled out my phone and checked the app. Upload complete. Jenna texted me 10 seconds later. "Got it. That is the nail in the coffin. That is clear coercive control with a threat of physical harm tied to financial silence. She just handed us a felony." I touched my head. It hurt, but the pain felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the cameraman filming a documentary about their downfall. I wasn't done yet. I needed one more piece of the puzzle. I needed to implicate Landon. I found him in the hallway upstairs, playing a game on his phone. He looked up as I approached, his expression a mix of guilt and annoyance. He knew what was happening tomorrow. He knew I was being kicked out so he could take my place as the beneficiary. "Hey, Landon," I said, stopping in front of him. He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "Hey, I am really worried," I said, letting my voice crack. "If I sign all those papers tomorrow, if I give up my claim, I am scared Grandma won't forgive me. She gave me that money for a reason. If I just walk away..." Landon rolled his eyes. "Oh my God. Lena, stop being so dramatic." "But it is stealing, isn't it?" I asked, pressing him, using my name. Landon scoffed. "It is not stealing. It is keeping the money in the family. Look, just sign the papers. Dad said if you don't sign, we can't get the next transfer. And I need that money. Lena, I have debts." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And don't tell Grandma about the transfers, okay? Dad taught me exactly what to say if she asks. We just say you used it for therapy. Just stick to the script. Dad said don't tell Grandma about the transfers in your name, and everything will be fine." I nodded slowly. "So Dad taught you to lie to her?" "Yeah, obviously," Landon said, impatient to get back to his game. "Everyone lies to her. It is how we survive. Just sign the paper. Lena, stop making it hard." He pushed past me and went into his room, slamming the door. I reached into the front pocket of my hoodie. My thumb pressed the stop button on the voice recorder app I had been running since I left my room. "Dad said if you don't sign, we can't get the next transfer. Dad taught me exactly what to say. Everyone lies to her. I saved the file. I named it Landon Confession, MP3, and uploaded it to the same folder as the video. I had them all: the father who orchestrated the fraud, the stepmother who enforced it with violence, the brother who was complicit in the cover-up. I went back to my room and started to pack, not because I was leaving, but because Jenna had told me to make it look convincing. I threw clothes into a suitcase. I cleared off my desk. I left the walls bare. I wanted the room to look like a surrender. At 9 o'clock, I received a text from Jenna. "We are ready. The petition for the restraining order is drafted and signed by the judge on an emergency basis due to the video evidence. Marcus has the revocation of trusteeship ready. We are mobilizing." I typed back, "Grant says his lawyer is coming at 9 tomorrow." Jenna replied, "Perfect. We will be there at 9:10. I lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of the house. I heard Grant snoring in the master bedroom, a heavy, self-satisfied sound. I heard the wind rattling the loose pane in the hallway window, a window I had meant to fix next week. I thought about the roof over my head. I knew exactly how much the shingles cost. I knew the name of the contractor who installed them. I thought about the furnace in the basement. I knew the date it was serviced because I had taken the day off work to let the technician in. This wasn't their house. They were just squatters in the architecture of my life. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was a cold, hard clarity. I felt like a surgeon scrubbing in for a complex operation. I was about to cut the cancer out of this family, and I wasn't going to use anesthesia. I closed my eyes, trying to rest, when I heard it. It was a low, rhythmic thrumming sound coming from outside. It was distant, but distinct. Thwoop, thwoop, thwoop. I sat up and went to the window. The backyard was dark, stretching out into the empty field behind our property that belonged to the old Miller estate. The sound grew louder for a moment, then faded as the engine cut. It was the sound of a helicopter rotor slowing down. I checked the time. Midnight. Grant and Vanessa were asleep, dreaming of the money they would spend. They didn't hear the sound of the cavalry arriving. They didn't know that less than a mile away, in a dark field, a machine had just touched down carrying a billionaire grandmother and a team of lawyers who were sharpening their knives. I went back to bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. "Sleep well. Dad," I whispered to the dark house, "enjoy the house while it is still yours, because when the sun comes up, the lease is expiring." I touched the bruise on my temple. It throbbed, a steady drumbeat of pain. "Stop snitching." I smiled into the pillow. I wasn't snitching. I was testifying. And tomorrow, the whole world was going to hear it. The morning of the meeting arrived with the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of a funeral, though my family was dressed for a coronation. I walked down the stairs at 8:30 in the morning. The house smelled of stale coffee and an aggressive amount of sandalwood cologne. Landon was pacing the hallway, checking his reflection in the mirror every 30 seconds. He was wearing a shirt that was too tight across the shoulders, trying to look like a man who deserved to inherit a fortune. In the dining room, the stage was set. Grant was wearing his business suit, a navy blue number that he had bought 10 years ago. It was slightly shiny at the elbows and tight around the waist, a testament to a decade of sedentary greed. He sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid, arranging a stack of papers with the meticulousness of a card shark dealing a rigged hand. Vanessa sat to his right. She was wearing a cream-colored silk blouse and gold jewelry that I knew for a fact had been bought with money withdrawn from the Rhode Island account under the memo home maintenance. She looked radiant, practically vibrating with the anticipation of finally getting rid of me. "Good morning, Lena," Grant said without looking up. "Sit down." I took the seat opposite them. I was wearing jeans and a plain gray sweater. I wore no makeup, letting the bruise on my temple, now a sickly green and purple, shine under the chandelier lights. I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to sign their names next to the evidence of their violence. On the table in front of me sat a thick document bound in a blue folder. The title page was printed in bold, capital letters, "Agreement to Release Claims and Voluntary Departure Waiver." Grant tapped the document with a thick finger. "Read it if you want," he said, his tone bored. "But it is standard stuff. Basically, it says you are leaving of your own free will, that you have no claim to this property, no claim to the trust, and no claim to any future assets of Fox Legacy Holdings. It also states that you acknowledge your emotional instability and appoint us as your transition guardians to handle any outstanding financial matters." I looked at the paper. It was a death warrant for my legal identity. It was a confession of insanity and a transfer of ownership all rolled into one. "And if I sign this?" I asked, my voice quiet. "Then you get $5,000 cash for a deposit on an apartment," Grant said, smiling benevolently. "And we don't call the police to have you removed for trespassing." Vanessa leaned forward, her gold bracelets jingling. "And remember, Lena," she added, her eyes hard, "once you walk out that door, the rule still stands. Stop snitching. You don't call Eleanor, you don't email her, you disappear. If we hear that you have been bothering her with your stories, we will sue you for breach of contract. This document has a confidentiality clause." I looked at the clause she was pointing to. It carried a penalty of $50,000 for defamation of family character. "I understand," I said. Grant checked his watch. It was a gold knockoff Rolex he liked to flash around town. "My lawyer will be here any minute," he said. "He is just coming to notarize the signatures. Don't say anything stupid to him. I don't want Grandma to hear about any drama today. Her heart, you know, we have to protect her." The irony was so thick I could taste it like copper in my mouth. He was stealing her money, abusing her granddaughter, and gaslighting her trust officers, all under the banner of protecting her heart. I folded my hands in my lap. I was shaking, but not from fear. I was shaking with the adrenaline of a soldier listening to the countdown before a detonation. At exactly 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Grant smiled, a wide, triumphant grin. "Showtime," he said. "Go let him in, Landon." Landon hurried to the door. I heard the lock turn. I heard the door open. Grant straightened his tie. He picked up a pen, ready to play the magnanimous patriarch. But the voice that drifted in from the hallway was not the gravelly voice of Grant's drinking buddy who worked as a notary. It was a sharp, clear, female contralto. "Mr. Harrow?" the voice asked. Grant frowned. He stood up, confused. "Who is that?" Before he could move, the footsteps clicked rapidly across the hardwood floor. Jenna Ruiz walked into the dining room. She looked like a shark in a tailored black suit. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she carried a leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to break a window. She didn't look at Grant. She didn't look at Vanessa. She looked straight at me and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "Who are you?" Grant demanded, blustering. "Where is Bob?" "My name is Jenna Ruiz," she said, her voice cool and professional. "I am an attorney with the firm of Ruiz, Miller, and Stein. I am representing Lena Harrow." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. Grant blinked. "Representing Lena? She doesn't have a lawyer. She doesn't have any money." "That is a matter of dispute," Jenna said. She walked to the table. She didn't ask permission. She simply pulled out the chair next to me and sat down. She placed her briefcase on the table, right on top of Grant's neatly arranged agreement to release claims. Grant's face turned a mottled shade of red. "Get out of my house," he sputtered. "This is a private family meeting. You are trespassing." Jenna ignored him. She clicked the latches of her briefcase open. They sounded like gunshots in the quiet room. She pulled out a stack of files 3 inches thick. She slammed them down on the table. "Mr. Harrow," she began, her voice steady and loud. "Before anyone signs anything, I think we need to review the full discovery regarding the assets in question." She opened the first file. It was the bank statements from Rhode Island. She fanned them out across the table, covering Vanessa's silk placemats. "We have bank records indicating a systematic diversion of funds from Fox Legacy Holdings into a secondary account in Lena's name." She said, "Funds totaling over $200,000 over a period of 2 years." Vanessa went pale. She reached for her wine glass, but her hand was shaking so badly she knocked it over. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth, looking like a bloodstain spreading between us. Jenna didn't flinch. She pulled out the next file. We have forensic analysis of the signatures on the withdrawal slips, confirming forgery, she continued. She pulled out the next one. The photos of my face, the photos of my arms, the photos of the bruises. And we have documented evidence of long-term physical abuse and coercive control, used to facilitate this financial fraud. Grant was shaking now. His bluster was evaporating, replaced by the cornered panic of a rat. You can't prove any of that, he stammered. That is fake. Lena is a liar. She made it up. This is my house. I tell you who stays and who goes. You have no right. Mr. Harrow. Jenna cut him off, her voice like a whip. I strongly suggest you do not make statements about property ownership until we clarify who the beneficial owner actually is. Because according to the county records and the trust documents I have right here, she pulled out the occupancy agreement I had photographed from his safe. You are not the owner. You are a caretaker whose residency is contingent on the safety of the beneficiary you just tried to coerce into signing a waiver. Grant stared at the document. He looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. He realized then that I had been in his safe. He realized the dumb, compliant daughter had outmaneuvered him. You little bitch, he whispered. Jenna stood up. That is enough, she said. We are filing for an immediate restraining order and a petition for removal of trusteeship. Grant slammed his hands on the table. I don't care what papers you have, he shouted, spit flying from his lips. This is my mother's house. She put me in charge. She trusts me. If she were here, she would throw you both out. And then, the world answered him. It started as a low vibration in the floorboards. Then, the crystal glasses in the china cabinet began to rattle. A deep, thumping sound grew from a whisper to a roar, enveloping the house. Thwup, 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 thwup. The sound was deafening. It wasn't a car. It wasn't a truck. It was coming from above and from the backyard. What the hell is that? Landon yelled over the noise, looking at the ceiling as if it might collapse. The wind picked up outside. The trees in the garden whipped violently against the windows. Shadows flickered across the dining room walls as massive rotor blades sliced through the sunlight. It's a helicopter, Vanessa shrieked, running to the French doors that led to the patio. Grant followed her, stumbling. Jenna and I stood up calmly. We walked to the windows. In the center of the large, flat lawn behind the house, the lawn Grant obsessively mowed every Sunday, a sleek black helicopter was settling onto the grass. The downdraft flattened the rose bushes Vanessa prized so much. The engine whined down, a high-pitched scream that slowly descended into a rhythmic idle. The side door of the helicopter slid open. A man in a dark suit stepped out first. It was Marcus Hale. I recognized him from his LinkedIn profile. Though he looked taller in person, he reached a hand back into the cabin. And then, she emerged. Eleanor Fox stepped onto the grass of the home she technically owned but hadn't visited in 10 years. She did not look like the frail, confused old woman Grant had described. She wore a tan trench coat belted at the waist and dark sunglasses that hid her eyes. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon that defied the wind from the rotors. She held a cane, but she didn't lean on it. She carried it like a scepter. She began to walk toward the house. Her stride was purposeful, eating up the distance between the aircraft and the patio doors. Grant stood frozen at the glass, his mouth hanging open. He looked like he was witnessing a resurrection. Mom? He breathed, the fog on the glass obscuring his terrified face. Vanessa grabbed his arm. Grant, why is she here? You said she couldn't travel. You said she was bedridden. Grant didn't answer. He pushed the door open and stumbled out onto the patio. Mom, he called out, his voice cracking. Eleanor didn't stop. She didn't smile. She walked right up to the edge of the patio, Marcus flanking her like a bodyguard. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were sharp, clear, and blue, the same color as mine. They swept over Grant, over Vanessa, over Landon cowering in the doorway, and then they looked past them, through the glass, directly at me. I stayed inside, standing next to Jenna. I felt a lump form in my throat. This was the woman I had been told would die if I spoke. She looked like she could survive a nuclear winter. Grant tried to regain his composure. He smoothed his jacket, putting on his good son mask, though it was slipping badly. "Mom, what a surprise," he said, his voice pitching too high. We weren't expecting you. You should have called. Is everything okay? Is it your heart?" Eleanor stopped 3 feet from him. She looked at the helicopter behind her, then back at her son. "My heart is fine. Grant," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the dying whine of the engine like a razor blade. "It is my hearing that I was worried about." "Your hearing?" Grant asked, sweating now. "Yes," Eleanor said. "I kept hearing stories. Stories about a granddaughter who lives in my house but isn't allowed to talk to me. Stories about a girl who was told to stop snitching, or she would be thrown out on the street." She took a step closer. Grant flinched. "I wanted to see for myself," Eleanor said, her gaze moving to the stack of papers visible through the open door on the dining table. "I wanted to see what kind of family needs a legal waiver just to have breakfast." Vanessa stepped forward, trying to play the hostess. "Oh, Eleanor, you must be confused," she said, flashing a brittle, terrified smile. "We were just helping Lena with some paperwork. She is moving out today. She wants to be independent." Eleanor turned her gaze to Vanessa. It was a look of such withering disdain that Vanessa actually took a step back. "I know exactly what she is doing." "Vanessa," Eleanor said, "and I know exactly who is moving out today." She bypassed them. She didn't hug them. She didn't ask how they were. She walked past her son and her daughter-in-law as if they were furniture and stepped through the French doors into the dining room. The room felt suddenly small. Eleanor Fox filled the space with a gravity that sucked the air out of everyone else. She stopped in front of me. Up close, I could see the lines on her face, the map of 70 years of life, but I also saw the steel underneath. She looked at the bruise on my temple. She looked at the green and purple blooming on my skin. Her jaw tightened, a small muscle jumping in her cheek. She reached out a hand. Her fingers were cool and dry. She touched the spot just below the bruise, a feather-light contact that made my eyes burn with sudden tears. "Lena," she said softly. "Grandma," I whispered. She looked at Jenna. "You must be the lawyer," Eleanor said. "I am," Jenna said, extending a hand. "Jenna Ruiz. It is an honor, Mrs. Fox." Eleanor shook her hand firmly. "Is the paperwork ready?" Eleanor asked. "It is," Jenna replied. "Good." Eleanor turned around. Grant, Vanessa, and Landon had followed her inside. They stood in a huddle near the door, looking like children caught standing over a broken vase. Grant tried one last time. "Mom, please," he said, his voice trembling with desperation. "Let's sit down. Let's have some coffee. I can explain. Lena has been having episodes. We were just trying to manage her. The money was just a loan. We were going to pay it back." Eleanor didn't yell. She didn't scream. She simply lifted her cane and pointed it at the table, at the agreement to release claims that Grant had been so proud of 10 minutes ago. "A loan?" she asked. "Is that what you call forgery? Grant, is that what you call beating a 30-year-old woman because she wanted to call her grandmother?" Grant went white. How do you—" "I received an email," Eleanor said, "from a very brave young woman who finally decided that stopping snitching was the wrong advice." She looked at Vanessa. "You hit her," Eleanor stated. "It wasn't a question." Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at the camera I had hidden on the spice rack, which was now visible through the open kitchen door, and realized with a dawning horror that the house she thought was her kingdom had been a trap all along. She fell," Vanessa whispered, the lie sounding pathetic even to her own ears. Eleanor let out a short, sharp laugh. It was devoid of humor. "Grant," Eleanor said, "do you remember the truth clause?" Grant nodded, sweat dripping down his forehead. "You violated it," Eleanor said. "You, your wife, and your son. You violated the safety covenant. You violated the financial integrity clause. And you violated the non-coercion statutes." She looked around the room, taking in the new sofa, the expensive curtains, the lifestyle she had unwittingly funded for people who treated her granddaughter like a servant. "Marcus," Eleanor said without looking back at her lawyer. "Yes, Mrs. Fox?" Marcus stepped forward. "What is the penalty for breach of the truth clause?" "Immediate disinheritance and removal from the trust," Marcus recited, "and immediate revocation of residency rights." Eleanor nodded. She looked at Grant. "You told Lena she had to leave by noon, didn't you?" she asked. Grant didn't answer. He was staring at the floor. "Well," Eleanor said, checking her own watch, "a simple, practical timepiece. It is 9:15. That gives you 2 hours and 45 minutes. Grant looked up. "Mom, no, you can't. This is my home." "It was never your home, Grant," Eleanor said, her voice hardening into iron. "It was a shelter I provided for you, a shelter you used to hurt my blood." She turned back to me. Her eyes softened again. "Lena," she said. "Yes, Grandma?" "This house belongs to the trust," she said. "And as of this moment, the trust recognizes only one beneficiary in good standing." She gestured to the room, to the table, to the view of the garden where her helicopter sat waiting. "It is your decision," she said. "You are the mistress of this house now." I looked at Grant. I looked at Vanessa. I looked at the documents on the table. The power shift was so sudden, so absolute, it made me dizzy. 10 minutes ago, I was begging for permission to leave. Now, I held the keys to their existence. I looked at Jenna. She gave me a small, fierce smile. I took a deep breath. I felt the bruise on my temple throb, but it didn't hurt anymore. It felt like a badge of honor. I looked Grant in the eye. "I don't want them to have until noon," I said. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "I want them out now," I said. Grant's face crumpled. But we haven't packed." I picked up the agreement to release claims he had forced me to read. I ripped it in half. "Stop snitching, Dad," I said, my voice steady and cold, "and start packing. You have 10 minutes before Jenna calls the police to enforce the trespassing order." Grant looked at his mother, begging for a reprieve. Eleanor didn't even look at him. She had walked over to the window and was admiring the view. Her back turned to the son who had betrayed her. The silence in the room was broken only by the sound of Vanessa sobbing, but this time, no one offered her a tissue. I sat down at the head of the table, Grant's seat. "Tick-tock," I said. And for the first time in 5 years, I watched my father obey me. The atmosphere in the dining room shifted from a chaotic intrusion to a frozen, terrifying formality. It was no longer a breakfast table where a family ate toast. It was a tribunal. Jenna gestured for me to sit next to her. I took the seat, placing my back to the window where the helicopter blades had finally stopped spinning. Across from us, Grant, Vanessa, and Landon sat in a row like defendants at an arraignment. Grant was sweating through his cheap suit. Vanessa was clutching her wine glass so hard I thought the stem would snap. Landon just looked sick, his eyes darting between the grandmother he barely knew and the parents he was realizing he didn't know at all. Marcus Hale sat at the head of the table, opposite Grant, while Eleanor took the chair closest to me. She placed her cane on the floor and folded her hands. She didn't look at her son. She looked at Marcus. "Proceed," she said. Her voice was low, devoid of warmth. Marcus opened the leather binder he had brought from the helicopter. He didn't speak with anger. He spoke with the deadly calm of a man who charges $800 an hour to ruin people's lives. "Let us begin with the financials," Marcus said. He slid a document across the mahogany table. It spun perfectly, stopping right in front of Grant. "This is a summary of the transfers from Fox Legacy Holdings to the account ending in 4092. Marcus stated, "This account was established 3 years ago under the name of Lina Harrow. The total amount transferred to date is $240,000. Grant swallowed hard. His eyes flicked to the paper, then away. Those funds, Marcus continued, were authorized by Mrs. Fox for the specific benefit of her granddaughter. They were designated for educational advancement, professional development, or the purchase of a primary residence. He slid a second document across. This is the withdrawal history, Marcus said. As you can see, the account has been drained systematically. The withdrawal slips bear a signature purporting to be Lena Harrow's. However, the funds were not used for education or housing. They were used for, among other things, a new transmission for a Ford truck, a membership at the Maple Ridge Country Club, and substantial payments to a credit card held in the name of Vanessa Harrow. Grant cleared his throat. He tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace of pain. Now, hold on a minute, Grant said, his voice shaking. You are looking at this all wrong. Marcus, that money. Mom sent that money for the family. She knows we handle the finances together. He looked at Eleanor, pleading. Mom, you know how it is, he said. The house is old. Things break. I had to use that money to keep the roof over our heads. I paid for the repairs. I paid for the groceries. I used it to take care of Lena. She was struggling. Mom, I was just reallocating resources to make sure she was safe. It was a sacrifice. I handled the stress so she didn't have to. It was a masterful performance of the martyr role he had played my whole life, the benevolent father carrying the weight of the world. Eleanor didn't blink. She turned her head slowly to look at him. Reallocating resources, she repeated. Is that what you call it? She leaned forward. I did not send that money for the roof. Grant, I sent that money so Lena would never have to depend on a man for her survival. I sent it so she would never be trapped in a house she couldn't afford to leave. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming colder, sharper. I know what it is like to be financially controlled, she said, and I know exactly what kind of man you are. Do you think I forgot? Do you think I forgot how you treated Lena's mother? The room went deadly silent. I looked at Grant. He flinched as if he had been slapped. I know you locked her in the house, Eleanor said. I know you took her car keys. I know you made her beg you for money to buy diapers for Lena. I didn't intervene fast enough then, and I have lived with that guilt for 30 years. I swore I would never let that happen to my granddaughter. That money was her freedom. Grant, and you stole it to buy golf clubs. Grant opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The ghost of my mother, a woman I barely remembered, suddenly stood in the room with us, summoned by Eleanor's rage. Vanessa slammed her hand on the table, shattering the silence. This is ridiculous, she shouted. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You are listening to her? To this leech? She has lived here for 5 years rent-free. She eats our food. She uses our electricity. She is 30 years old, and she is still mooching off her daddy. She turned to Eleanor, her face twisted in an ugly snarl. You want to know where the money went? It went to feeding her. It went to keeping her lazy, useless self alive while she played on her computer all day. We deserve that money for putting up with her. Jenna didn't shout. She didn't argue. She simply connected her tablet to the portable projector she had pulled from her briefcase. She aimed it at the blank white wall behind Grant. Let us look at the data, Jenna said. A spreadsheet appeared on the wall. It was my spreadsheet, Project Phoenix. Jenna stood up and walked to the projection. This is a compiled record of every payment Lena Harrow has made in the last 5 years, she said. She pointed to the first column. Property taxes, 2021, 2022, 2023. Paid by Lena Harrow, total, $18,000. Roof replacement, October 2023. Paid by Lena Harrow, amount, $10,000. Furnace repair, paid by Lena Harrow. Grocery transfers to joint account. Weekly average, $400. Total over 5 years, $104,000. Jenna turned to Vanessa. Lena didn't mooch. Mrs. Harrow, Jenna said coldly, she subsidized you. According to these receipts, which I have cross-referenced with bank statements. Lena has paid for 80% of the household operating costs for the last 3 years. You weren't supporting her. She was supporting you." Vanessa stared at the wall. The numbers were undeniable. They glowed in black and white, stripping away her narrative of the burdened stepmother. "That is, those are fake," Vanessa stammered. "She typed those up herself." "We have the bank transaction IDs for every single line item," Jenna said. "Would you like me to pull up the canceled checks?" Vanessa slumped back in her chair. Landon looked at the screen, his mouth hanging open. He looked at me, then at the new gaming console sitting under the TV, a console I realized Grant must have bought with the allowance he stole from me. Grant tried a different tactic. He puffed out his chest. "Fine," he said. "Maybe she chipped in. She should. She lives here. But that doesn't change the fact that she is unstable. We had to protect her from herself. She gets hysterical. She makes things up. That is why we told her to stop snitching to you. Mom, we didn't want to worry you with her episodes." Jenna tapped the tablet screen again. "Speaking of episodes," she said, "let us watch one." The spreadsheet vanished. A video player appeared. It was the footage from the Spice Rack camera. It was from yesterday evening. On the wall, 10 feet tall, Vanessa appeared. She was cornering me in the kitchen. The audio was crystal clear, amplified by Jenna's Bluetooth speaker. "You will do no such thing," the digital Vanessa screamed. We watched as she grabbed my arm. We watched as she shoved me against the counter. "We talked about this. You do not call her. You do not ask for permission." And then, the slap. The sound of the impact cracked through the dining room like a whip. It was louder than it had been in real life. It was brutal. On the screen, my head snapped back. Then Vanessa's voice, low and venomous. "If you ever open your mouth to that old woman again, I swear you won't survive in this house." The video froze on Vanessa's face, twisted in rage. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Landon turned to his mother. He looked terrified. "Mom?" he whispered. You said she fell." Vanessa didn't answer. She was staring at her own face on the wall, her skin pale as a sheet. She knew there was no spinning this. There was no, she is clumsy excuse that could survive that video. Marcus cleared his throat. He closed the financial folder and opened a different one. The phrase, "stop snitching," Marcus said, his voice echoing in the quiet room, was not a request for privacy. It was not a family motto. It was a calculated tool of coercive control. He looked at Grant. "Under the truth." "Clause of the Fox Family Trust," Marcus explained. "Any beneficiary who uses violence, intimidation, or manipulation to prevent another beneficiary from communicating with the grantor is subject to immediate removal." He tapped the table with his finger. "You didn't just hit her, Grant. You didn't just steal from her. You built a cage out of silence and locked her inside it so you could rob the trust blind. That is not just bad parenting. That is a breach of contract, and it is a crime." Grant wiped sweat from his upper lip. He looked frantic, his eyes darting around the room for an exit. This is a family matter," he said, his voice rising in desperation. "We don't need lawyers involved in this. We don't need courts. Mom, please, look at me. I am your son. We can work this out. Lena is she is sensitive. We can fix this." Eleanor stood up. She moved slower than Jenna, but with far more weight. She leaned on her cane, looking down at the son she had raised. "Family matter?" she asked softly. She shook her head. "You lost the right to use the word family the moment you told my granddaughter she had to suffer in silence to protect your wallet. You lost it when you hit her. You lost it when you lied to me about her sanity to cover up your theft." She pointed at the screen, at the frozen image of Vanessa attacking me. "That is not family, Grant. That is a hostage situation." Jenna stepped forward again. She placed a single sheet of paper in front of Vanessa. "Speaking of hostage situations," Jenna said, "this is a copy of an ex parte restraining order application. It was submitted electronically to the county judge an hour ago, attached with the video evidence you just saw." Vanessa stared at the paper. Given the clear threat to Lena's life, you won't survive in this house. We expect the judge to sign it within the hour, Jenna said calmly. Once that order is active, Mrs. Harrow, you will be legally required to vacate these premises immediately and maintain a distance of 500 feet from Lena Harrow. If you are still here when the order comes through, the police will arrest you. Vanessa looked at Grant. Do something, she shrieked. She is kicking me out of my own house. Grant slammed his fist on the table. No, he roared. He stood up, knocking his chair over. This is too much. You come in here. You ambush us. You play these fake videos. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You think you are smart, Lena? You think you can just bring these people here and take over? This is my house. My name is on the mailbox. I have lived here for 20 years. I have rights. He turned to Marcus, his face purple with rage. You can't kick me out. I am a tenant. I have squatter's rights. I have possession. Marcus didn't blink. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. He placed it gently on the table. We anticipated you might say that, Marcus said. He opened the envelope and pulled out a yellowed document. It was the original occupancy agreement. He laid it flat. This is the agreement you signed 20 years ago. Grant, Marcus said, do you remember it? It grants you a revocable license to occupy the property. It is not a lease. It is not a deed. It is a license. He pointed to paragraph 4. Clause 4. Termination for cause. The grantor reserves the right to terminate this license immediately, without notice, if the licensee engages in criminal activity on the premises or acts in a manner detrimental to the safety of the primary beneficiary. Marcus pulled out a second document. The ink was fresh. It was dated today. And this, Marcus said, is the notice of termination, signed by Eleanor Fox this morning. He pushed it toward Grant. Your license has been revoked. Mr. Harrow, you are not a tenant. You are not an owner. As of this moment, you are a trespasser. Grant stared at the paper. His hands were shaking so hard he couldn't pick it up. The reality was crashing down on him. The walls he thought protected him, the family business, the my house rhetoric, were made of paper, and Marcus had just lit a match. Landon made a small, choking sound. He stood up slowly. Dad? Landon said. Is it true? Do we not own the house? Grant didn't answer. He just stared at the signature on the termination notice. It is all true. Landon, I said. My voice was quiet, but in the silence of the room, it carried. Everyone turned to look at me. I had been silent for most of the meeting, letting the lawyers and the documents speak for me, but now it was time. Eleanor turned to me. She ignored her son, ignored the weeping Vanessa, ignored the stunned Landon. She looked only at me. Lena, she said. She gestured to the wreckage of the family hierarchy scattered across the table. We have the evidence. We have the legal grounds. We can remove them by force. We can press charges. We can strip them of everything. She paused, her blue eyes searching mine. But this is your story, she said. You are the one who lived it. You are the one who took the hits. She placed her hand over mine on the table. What do you want to do? Do you want to keep silent? Or do you want to finish this? I looked at Grant. He was looking at me now, his eyes wet with fear. For the first time, he looked small. He looked like a man who knew he was about to lose the only thing he ever really loved, his comfort. Lena, honey, he whispered, please. I looked at Vanessa. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the door, calculating her exit, her selfishness intact to the bitter end. I looked at the bruise on my arm, hidden under my sleeve. I thought about the 5 years I had lost. I thought about the stop snitching rule. I stood up. I picked up the termination notice Marcus had placed on the table. I didn't look at the lawyers. I looked at my father. I want to speak, I said, and I want you to listen. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of expensive perfume, stale sweat, and the ozone smell of impending rain that drifted in through the open patio doors. I looked around the room. I saw my father, sweating and small in his cheap suit. I saw my stepmother, her mascara running in dark streaks down her face. I saw my brother, looking at his shoes, and I saw my grandmother and the lawyers, the architects of my liberation. For 5 years, the word "stop snitching" had been a wall built around me, brick by brick. They were designed to keep me small. They were designed to keep me silent. But as I stood at the head of the table, I realized that every threat, every slap, every stolen dollar had been leading to this exact second. The wall wasn't there to keep me in. It was there to keep the truth out. And I was about to tear it down. I started to speak. My voice was not loud, but it was steady. It didn't tremble. It didn't crack. "You want to know why I didn't speak before?" I asked, looking directly at Eleanor. It wasn't because I was unstable. It wasn't because I was confused. I turned to Vanessa. I pointed to the corner of the kitchen, visible through the doorway. 3 years ago, on Thanksgiving, I said, the memory sharp as a knife. I asked Vanessa why the grocery money I transferred, $500, was gone in 2 days. She dragged me into that corner. She squeezed my throat until I saw black spots dancing in my vision. She told me that if I ruined her holiday with my questions, she would make sure I couldn't eat the dinner I had cooked. Vanessa flinched, shrinking back in her chair. I turned to Grant. 2 years ago, I continued, I tried to call you. Grandma, it was your birthday. I had a card. Grant ripped the phone out of my hand. He threw it against the wall. He told me that your heart was failing. He told me that if I upset you with my whining, you would die. And he would make sure everyone in town knew I killed you. I looked at my father. You used her life as a weapon against me. I said, you made me believe that my love for her was the thing that would kill her. Grant shook his head frantically. No, Lena, I was protecting her. You know how she gets. I ignored him. I looked back at Eleanor. It was always about the money. I said, every time I asked about a bank statement, I got hit. Every time I asked why the roof repair cost $15,000 when the quote was 10, I got locked in my room. Every time I suggested that maybe, just maybe, you could send the money directly to me so I could manage it, the violence escalated. I touched the bruise on my temple. Yesterday, I said, Vanessa hit me because I said I wanted to ask your permission to leave. She said I wouldn't survive in this house if I opened my mouth. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. They didn't hate me because I was a burden, Grandma. They hated me because I was the witness. Jenna stepped forward then. She placed a small digital recorder on the table. And they weren't the only ones, Jenna said. She pressed play. The voice of Landon filled the room. It was the recording I had made just the night before. Dad said if you don't sign, we can't get the next transfer. Dad taught me exactly what to say if she asks. We just say you used it for therapy. Everyone lies to her. It is how we survive. Landon went white. He looked at Jenna, then at me, his eyes wide with betrayal. You recorded me? He whispered. Jenna looked at him coldly. You admitted to a conspiracy to defraud a trust. Mr. Harrow, you admitted that your father coached you to lie to the grantor. You are not an innocent bystander. You are a co-conspirator. Marcus Hale stood up. He buttoned his jacket. The movement was final, like a judge banging a gavel. He looked at the three of them. From this moment forward, Marcus announced, his voice filling the room, acting on the authority of the grantor and under the specific provisions of the Truth Clause, Eleanor Fox is hereby suspending all beneficial interests for Grant Harrow, Vanessa Harrow, and Landon Harrow. He looked at Grant. You are cut off. Grant, the stipend is gone. The access to the accounts is revoked. The inheritance is void. Pending a full forensic audit and criminal investigation, you will not receive a single penny from the Fox Family Trust. He turned to me. Lena Harrow, however, remains the sole beneficiary in good standing. Her rights to the trust and to this property are absolute. The silence that followed was deafening. The money, the God that Grant and Vanessa had worshipped, the God they had sacrificed their morality for, was dead. Grant made a sound like a wounded animal. He slid out of his chair. He didn't stand up. He fell to his knees. He crawled toward Eleanor. He actually crawled. "Mom, please," he cried, tears streaming down his red face. "You can't do this. I am your son. I made a mistake. I just wanted to provide. I borrowed it. I was going to pay it back. Don't cut me off. I have debts. Mom, I have people coming for me." He reached for the hem of her trench coat. Eleanor didn't move away. She didn't kick him. She just looked down at him with a look of profound, heartbreaking disappointment. "You borrowed it?" she asked softly. "From your daughter's future?" "Mom, please," Grant sobbed. "I am family." Eleanor shook her head. "You had a lifetime to choose differently." "Grant," she said, "you had 50 years to be a man. You chose to be a thief, and now you are asking me to pay for your choices again?" She pulled her coat out of his grip. "No," she said, "not this time." Vanessa, seeing her husband crumbling, decided to fight. She stood up, her face twisted with panic and rage. "This is a lie," she screamed, pointing at me. "She is lying. She knew about the money. She signed the checks." She looked at Marcus. "You saw the signatures. She signed them. She is just trying to save herself now. She is in on it." Marcus didn't even look up from his file. He pulled out a magnified image of one of the checks. "Mrs. Harrow," he said calmly, "we have already had a handwriting expert analyze these. The pressure points are wrong. The slant is wrong. And quite frankly, the attempt to copy Lena's signature is amateur at best." He looked at her. "Forging a signature is a felony. Doing it across state lines on bank documents is federal wire fraud. If I were you, I would stop talking before you add perjury to the list." Vanessa's mouth snapped shut. She looked around the room, realizing that every exit was blocked. Just then, a loud buzzing sound came from Jenna's pocket. She pulled out her phone. She looked at the screen, and a small, sharp smile appeared on her face. She held the phone up. "This," Jenna said, "is a notification from the county court." She looked at Vanessa. "The judge has reviewed the video evidence of the assault in the kitchen. He has also reviewed the affidavit regarding the financial coercion." Jenna walked over to the table and placed the phone down, screen facing up. "The temporary restraining order has been granted," Jenna announced, "effective immediately." She looked at Grant and Vanessa. "The order explicitly names Vanessa Harrow as a threat to the safety of Lena Harrow. It requires her to vacate the residence at 442 Maple Drive immediately. It also grants Lena Harrow, as the protected party and the authorized occupant of the home, the right to request the removal of any other persons contributing to an unsafe environment." Jenna looked at me. "Basically, Lena, the law just gave you the house. You decide who stays and who goes." The room turned to me. Grant was still on his knees. Vanessa was leaning against the sideboard, looking like she was about to faint. Landon was sitting with his head in his hands. Eleanor turned to me. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "It is your call, Lena," she said. She gestured to the people who had tormented me for 5 years. "The lawyers can handle the eviction process. It can take a few days. We can let them stay here while we sort it out. We can put you in a hotel." She looked me in the eye. "Or, you can end it right now. Do you want them to stay? Or do you want them gone?" I looked at them. I remembered the nights I lay in bed, hungry because I didn't want to go downstairs and face them. I remembered the way Grant laughed when I told him I got a promotion, asking if it paid enough to fix his car. I remembered Vanessa calling me a single loser and a parasite. I remembered the fear, the constant, grinding fear that I was one mistake away from being homeless. I looked at the dining table. It was my table. I bought it. I looked at the walls. I paid for the paint. I looked at the roof. I paid for the shingles. This wasn't their house. It never had been. I stood up straighter. The pain in my head was gone. The fear was gone. I pointed at the front door. "Get out," I said. Grant looked up, blinking through his tears. "Lena." "What?" "I said get out," I repeated, my voice ringing off the walls. Get out of my house. Today. Right now. Grant scrambled to his feet. Lena, be reasonable, he pleaded. It is almost noon. Where are we supposed to go? We haven't packed. We don't have any cash. I don't care, I said. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of him. You gave me 24 hours, I said. I am giving you 20 minutes. Vanessa stepped forward. You can't do this. We have rights. We need time to find a place. Jenna stepped in between us. Actually, Jenna said, checking her watch, you don't. The restraining order is immediate. If you are not off the property in 20 minutes, I am authorized to call the sheriff's department to effect an arrest for violation of a court order. And given the video evidence of assault, they won't just escort you off. They will book you. She looked at Grant. If I were you, Mr. Harrow, I would grab a bag. A criminal record will make it very hard to find a new rental. Grant looked at Marcus. Marcus just nodded. Grant looked at his mother. Eleanor had turned her back on him again. He realized, finally, that the game was over. The bluff had been called. The house of cards had collapsed. Fine, Grant shouted, his voice cracking. Fine, we are leaving. He turned to Vanessa. Go pack a bag, just the essentials. Ooh. Vanessa let out a wail of despair, but she ran for the stairs. Grant followed her, muttering curses under his breath. Landon stood up slowly. He looked at me. He looked like a lost child. Lena, he said. I looked at him. I didn't know about the hitting, he said, his voice trembling. I mean, I knew they were mean, but I didn't know. He took a step toward me. Can I stay? Just for a few days? Until I figure things out? I am your brother. Lena, I didn't sign the papers. I looked at him. I saw the boy I used to help with homework, but I also saw the man who had stood by while I was abused. I saw the man who had agreed to take my place as the beneficiary. I saw the man who told me to just sign the waiver so he could pay his gambling debts. He wasn't innocent. He was just weaker than the others. No, Landon, I said. He looked shocked. But where will I go? I don't know, I said. You are 22 years old. Figure it out. I pointed to the stairs. Go pack. He stood there for a second, waiting for me to cave, waiting for the sister who always fixed everything to fix this too. When I didn't blink, his shoulders slumped. He turned and walked away, dragging his feet. For the next 20 minutes, the house was filled with the sounds of frantic movement, drawers opening and slamming, suitcases being zipped, shouting, blaming. I stood in the hallway with Eleanor, Marcus, and Jenna. We didn't speak. We just stood guard. Finally, they came down. Grant was dragging 2 large suitcases. Vanessa had a duffel bag and her jewelry box. Landon had a backpack. They looked like refugees from a war they had started. Grant stopped at the door. He looked at the house one last time. He looked at the living room where he had sat for 20 years, drinking whiskey paid for by his mother and his daughter. You will regret this, Lena, he spat, his face twisted with hate. You think you can run this place alone? You are nothing without us. I looked at him. I felt nothing. No love, no hate, just a profound sense of relief. I have been running this place alone for 5 years. Dad, I said, I think I will be fine. Vanessa tried to push past me, aiming for the door. I hope you rot in here, she hissed. I opened the door for them. The wind from the garden blew in, fresh and clean. Goodbye, Vanessa, I said. They stepped out onto the porch. Landon lingered for a second. He looked at me, eyes wet. Lena, he started. I looked at him. I have a choice, Landon, I said, and so do you. You can grow up, or you can be like them. But don't you ever use the words "stop snitching" with anyone ever again. I stepped back. I closed the heavy oak door. I locked the deadbolt. The click was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It sounded like a prison cell opening. I turned around. The house was quiet. The shouting was gone. The tension that had vibrated in the walls for 5 years had evaporated. It was just me, my grandmother, and the people who had fought for me. Eleanor walked over to me. She dropped her cane on the floor. She wrapped her arms around me. She smelled of lavender and rain. "It is over," she whispered into my hair. I hugged her back, burying my face in her shoulder. I didn't cry. I felt too light to cry. "From today on," Eleanor said, pulling back and holding my face in her hands, "you never have to be afraid of the truth again. This house, this money, this life, we are going to rebuild it, and it is going to be built on your voice." I looked around the empty hallway. It didn't look scary anymore. It looked like a blank canvas. "I am ready," I said. And for the first time in my life, I really was. Thank you so much for listening to Lena's story. I am dying to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening while cooking dinner in London? Stuck in traffic in New York? Or relaxing at home in Sydney? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help us share these stories with more people.